Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. We are all keenly aware of the winter storms that hit Michigan over the last few weeks. Very good. Yes, we do. Thank you, thank you. All right. The House Energy, Communications, and Technology Committee will come to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Scott.
Present.
Representatives Andrews.
Present.
Coleman.
Here.
Whitsitt.
Here.
Neely.
Here.
Burns.
Here.
Churches. Hill.
Here.
McDonald.
Present.
McFall.
Here.
Wenzel.
Here.
Outman.
Here.
Aragona. Begol.
Here.
Green.
Here.
Preston.
Here.
Schmaltz.
Here.
Madam Clerk, you have 15 members present. You have a quorum.
Wonderful. We need a motion to adopt the minutes from the March 8th, 2023 meeting. Thank you, Rep. Coleman. All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. We are all keenly aware of the winter storms that hit Michigan over the last few weeks. We also know that these storms led to hundreds of thousands of power outages and over 10,000 down electrical wires across Michigan. One of our central goals during this committee hearing is to gather information and the factors that caused such a huge number of Michigan households and businesses to be without power and heat for days. Michigan residents, small businesses, and business owners were understandably frustrated and angry. It's been well documented that Michigan residents pay the 11th highest rates for electricity in the U.S. We are here today to get to the bottom of why these outages keep happening. We are holding this hearing to take a closer look at the utility companies and anyone who should be held accountable for the long wait on restoration times for Michigan customers. So, we've asked from the energy utility companies and the Michigan Public Service Commission to be here in attendance today for this public hearing. With the increase in severity and frequency of storms and severe weather, it's imperative that we find ways to safeguard communities and strengthen our electrical grid. We cannot and we will not accept that this is our new normal. The power grid and associated infrastructure must be, and I stress, it must be reinforced, it must be updated and improved so that Michigan residents are safe, warm, and receive the services that they pay for. With that background on the table, let's all continue with the hearing and the testimonies. So at this time, I'm going to call forth to the table DTE Electric President and Chief Operating Officer Trevor Lauer. Welcome. Correct. Yes. Please proceed. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairwoman Scott, Vice Chair Andrews, and Vice Chair Wenzel. My name is Trevor Lauer, and I operate the electric company at DTE, and I appreciate the opportunity to come in today and talk about the winter weather that affected our customers at the end of February and also in March, and it caused some of our customers to lose power. Before I get deep into the testimony, I submitted testimony also. I am not going to read the testimony this morning. I'll keep this brief so we can get to Q&A. I do want to apologize on behalf of myself and all of our customers and all of our employees to the customers and communities that lost power. We recognize that any time without power is a hardship, and when you have to go days without power, it's even harder on our customers. This is not the service that we expect to give to our customers, nor is it the investment that we're putting into our grid. It's not what we would have expected to happen, even in a major ice storm like we had. I also want to thank our men and women of DTE who worked a lot of hours, and our labor partners and our other partners that helped us with the restoration. This was a major effort that we put in place, and I would be remiss if I did not thank the men and women of DTE and all of our other partners that helped us. We were able to do all the restorations, and we were able to do it safely. And that's something that's really important to us to make sure that nobody gets injured. My testimony today is really divided into three pieces. One, I'd like to touch on the weather. Two, I'll touch on the restoration activities that we did at DTE. And third, I'd like to talk about what's the solutions or our proposed solutions going forward. So first, I'll start with the weather. What used to be referred to as a one-in-a-century or one-in-a-decade storm now is coming on regular basis at Southeast Michigan. In 2017, we had hurricane force winds that blew up to 70 miles an hour for 10 straight hours that caused havoc on our electric system. In 2021, we had 12 different windstorms that had winds exceeding 50 miles an hour. We had unprecedented flooding and 6 tornadoes just in southeast Michigan. And now in early 2023, we have the worst ice storm that Michigan has seen in 50 years. What's clear is the weather has changed, the weather patterns continue to change, and our job, and we accept the responsibilities to harden the grid so we offer our customers the reliability that they expect and the reliability that we would expect to give them. So how do we do that? I'll go to the second point first, and the second point is how do we do in restoration? So on February 22nd, an ice storm came that spanned from Lake Michigan to Lake Erie. It's the worst ice storm that the state of Michigan has seen in 50 years, and if you looked at any of the outage maps, you could see the ice band that went across the state. It was approximately 50 to 75 miles north-south, and that's where all the outages occurred. Where we had snow and just wind, we did not have outages on our electrical system. Unfortunately, we saw national weather forecasters talk about this storm coming and that Michigan was going to be at the epicenter of this ice storm 7 days prior. We pre-staged almost 2,000 crews and equipment getting ready for the ice storm, and the atmospheric conditions set up for us to get the worst possible conditions we could have had. We had almost 3/4 of an inch of ice in certain areas of our service territory, and I can only say it brought down trees, branches, and every other piece of infrastructure that attached itself to. Really proud to say that we mustered a force of almost 4,000 people in the field. It's the largest restoration force we've ever had at DTE, and we restored 95% of the customers in 3 days. So we had over 20% of our customers, so we restored over 600,000 customers in 3 days. So great job by our crews, really proud of them, but it wasn't good enough because we still had other customers, a handful that were out for up to 7 days due to the ice storm. We did it safely. We also did wellness checks. We did over 22,000 wellness checks. We had 90 generators in the field for customers that were on life-critical activities that contacted DTE. We coordinated with cities and communities to make sure that warming centers were in place. But I recognize it's not enough, and we need to continue to strengthen the grid. So how do we do that? We submitted a plan to the Michigan Public Service Commission in 2021. We have another one that's due this year. It's called our Distribution Grid Plan. In it, we highlight 4 things that I think are critical for us to talk about, and it shows the increasing investment that DTE is currently making in our electric grid because we recognize it needs to happen. Number 1 is tree trimming. We have been and will remain a fierce advocate for tree trimming. 70% of our customers' outages come from trees falling both inside and outside of our right-of-ways. We need to be able to work with our customers to be able to take down trees, but we need to get our customers' permission to do that. So we take down trees that are inside the utility right-of-ways, and we take down trees that are outside of the utility right-of-ways. In 2021, we invested $180 million in tree trimming on behalf of our customers. In 2022, that rose to $240 million. A well-funded and well-operated tree trim program is absolutely essential to any utility that has overhead infrastructure. Number 2 is we need to continue preventative maintenance. We have 1.2 million poles, 40,000 transformers, and numerous other pieces of equipment on our system. Maintaining that equipment well and continuing to invest in that equipment is absolutely critical for our system to operate well. Pole top maintenance is a really important piece. Calendar year 21, we invested $31 million. In calendar year 22, we invested $84 million, and we're requesting from the Public Service Commission to move that up to $120 million, because when we make these investments, we know that they work. Number 3, we need to invest in changing out our system or rebuilding it. The city of Detroit and the inner suburbs were one of not only the first cities in America, but the first cities in the world that were electrified. Some of our original infrastructure from the 1910s and 20s are still serving our customers. We need to continue to accelerate our investment in rebuilding the infrastructure. Much like roads, all infrastructure has a time when it needs to be replaced. We are replacing pieces of that. We need to continue to accelerate that replacement. Included with that is undergrounding. Strategic undergrounding of pieces of the equipment that are overhead today should go underground, and we need to continue to work with all of the stakeholders and our regulators on the importance of moving pieces of that underground. And lastly, number 4 is we need to automate our system. And when I speak about automation, we've been on an automation strategy at DTE for 5 years now. There are devices that you can install in the field that will allow you to reroute power to restore a customer's power without ever rolling a crew or rolling a truck out into the field. We've got an ambitious plan to move that forward in the next 5 to 6 years to install 10 to 20,000 devices in the field. This will not take away outages, but it will dramatically reduce the duration of the outages that our customers have. That's where we're struggling at DTE. It's not the frequency. We can lower the frequency, but we're in the top 50% of utilities of frequency. Where we really struggle is the duration. Automation is the key to do that. So, Chair, I would just say on behalf of everybody at DTE, I am very sorry for the outages that we had. We represent the hardship that it caused on our customers. This is not the experience that we would want for anybody. We have a plan. We need to continue to invest in that plan, and we need to find a way to work collectively with all of the stakeholders to increase the investment that's going into our grid. I'd be happy to take questions from the committee.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. We are going to take questions from the committee. I will ask that all committee members limit your questions to one question at this time. If you have potentially an additional question, if you could ask. Additionally, in the essence of time, we only have about 2 hours, and we have a lot of presenters, and we have a lot of people in the committee that want to ask questions. So I'm going to start off with it. So about your investors, in 2022, the earnings, you said would delay maintenance in order to hit earning targets. Isn't that a risk? Aren't you taking risks for outages to benefit your investors? And why would you put your investors before customers?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Scott. It's a great question. I really appreciate you asking. So there's 2 ways that I will answer the question. First, when you look at the actual preventative maintenance dollars that DTE Electric is putting into the system, we are at unprecedented levels. Tree trim, we've raised it by $60 million a year. Pull top maintenance, we've raised it by $53 million a year, and we continue to request to increase those levels. You're referring to an investor presentation that was done by our CFO. In that presentation, we've highlighted a handful of delays that I have asked the team to institute on the electrical system. We've put 2 guiding principles in place. 1, they cannot affect safety, and 2, they cannot affect our customers. I'll give you the 2 that we're doing on the electric distribution system. One of the preventative maintenance activities we do is at our substations. We have 750 substations in Southeast Michigan. It's mowing grass. We've moved our grass mowing schedule from every 2 weeks to every 6 weeks to conserve cash inside of the utility. The second activity that we're delaying is we look at, we have underground transformers, they're pedestal transformers, and we hire summer students, and they do a survey of 20% of the concrete pedestals. We are not hiring summer students this year, so I will not be doing an inventory of the additional 20%. I see no additional risk as we start to get in and delay those maintenance activities. Within our nuclear power plant, our other generation facilities, there are a handful of things we're moving from time-based maintenance to condition-based maintenance. But none of this has been instituted yet, and none of it will affect the reliability of our customers.
So all of us have gotten a lot of emails and calls, and complaints. I myself have gotten, these are the emails. I can't tell you umpteen calls that we've gotten in our office complaining about the lack of reliability. We all represent customers up here, our constituents. And we feel, for sure I do, that when they go to turn on their lights, that it's reliable because they pay bills. And it's important that they have reliable, consistent service, even in the weather conditions that we have. We live in Michigan. Winter storms will happen. They will happen in the summer. They will happen in the spring. So what's your plan moving forward? I hear about the tree trimming, but that's not enough, and yet you invest in that, and yet we still have outages. So what's your plan moving forward to make sure that when our customers flip their light switch, that they will have reliable electricity on a regular basis?
Yeah. Thank you, Chairwoman. I appreciate the question. And again, I agree with what you're saying. Our goal is to make sure that we have power on 100% of the time for our customers all the time. So I think we're very well aligned, and I I can't emphasize enough that the system has to operate all better, and we own that, right? So what's the plan going forward? Well, we've laid out an investment plan that's been used by multiple utilities across the country. This weather we're seeing is weather that's been inside of the Gulf Coast in Florida and others that have seen it for multiple years. Hardening your electrical system, rebuilding your electrical system, adding automation to your electrical system is the way you do it. Utilities in Florida and the Gulf Coast that have been dealing with this wild weather are 20 years into hardening their electrical systems and rebuilding sections. We have a plan, we're executing on it. We just need to continue to accelerate that. We started dramatically accelerating it 7 years ago, and we're not accelerating at the pace we need to offer the reliability to our customers. I'm not making excuses, but we have a massive electrical system at DTE. And it's going to take decades for us to continue to invest, but there are strategic investments that we can make quickly, like automation, that'll make a fundamental difference for our customers on the speed with which they get power back. And if I can self-restore 60 to 70% of the outages that customers have using automation, then I can use our crews to attack a lot of what I call the single outages, the customers that are left for 2 or 3 days at the end of a storm because it's a pole-to-wire outage. I'll give you one more great example. We worked very closely with the Public Service Commission in 2016, and we requested that no longer can overhead service drops, it's how we serve you from the pole to the home, can go overhead. They can only be buried going forward. Half of all of the trouble or outages we have on our system are overhead service drops. So now all of those are getting buried. It's absolutely the right thing to do. I have 1.8 million of those that are still in the air, and it causes a lot of outages on our electrical system. We need to attack issues like that.
Okay. There's also been a concern about the $35 compensation that DTE is planning to give its customers after, 96 hours of power outages?
Yes.
Is that something that's automatic? Is that something they have to request? And do you really feel that that's adequate?
Yeah. We have been applying that automatically to customers. Customers need to do nothing to receive the $35, the credit, and it's a penalty. So the question is it adequate? I don't believe that $35 can make up for somebody losing their food in their refrigerator or having a long outage or having to go stay with a relative. We recognize that. The $35 is set by the Michigan Public Service Commission. It's part of what the electric reliability standards are. There's very few states in the country that have penalties. This is meant as a penalty, and we have the highest penalty in the country right now at $35 for an outage of this time frame. To frame it for DTE, this is a $5.1 million penalty to our employees and to our shareholders that we will pay to our customers during this storm. Again, I can't emphasize enough that I know it does not make up for the food that employees have, or that customers have lost. But it's a fine balance between investing in the system also. The most important thing we can do to fix the grid and continue to have a solid grid that serves our customers is to invest in that grid and to continue to accelerate the investment in the workforce needed in the state of Michigan to accelerate that investment.
That really needs to be reevaluated because residents have lost food, they've lost medicine, they've lost breast milk. We've gotten a lot of calls that the fact that that is one major point of contention behind the fact that they've lost power. So we will proceed with questions. Representative Burns.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation this morning. My question is actually a follow-up to Chairwoman Scott's question regarding the credits for customers, which we know have been historically between $25 to $35. I think we can all acknowledge that that's not nearly enough to cover what folks have lost. And I know that you've mentioned that this is not the experience that DTE wants to deliver to its customers, and yet it is the experience that we have come to expect. And I speak to you as a customer myself. So can you talk to us about how you would go about making customers whole again, knowing that $35 is not enough? What would that process look like, and how can you reassure the members of this committee, and more importantly, your customers throughout the region, that if and ideally when the rate or the credit, I would say, is increased, that DTE would then not come back to the legislature or its customers and say, well, we've increased the credit, now we don't have any money and we need to turn around and raise your rates. Because that's what we tend to hear over and over again. So I need you to speak to what that process would be.
Yeah, so Representative Burns, thank you for the question. That process would be dictated by the Michigan Public Service Commission, not by the utilities. We would collaboratively work with them. It is meant as a penalty to the utilities. I will go back to what I tried to explain earlier, and I think the most important thing to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future is that we continue to be clear on what we need to do to invest in the system and how we need to continue to ramp that investment inside of the electrical system. I understand the penalty and I understand the desire to increase penalties, but I also recognize to make it better, we need to increase the investment or it will not get better for our customers. We have made increased investments, and where you make those investments, you continue to see the system operate better and better. From 21 to 22, the frequency of our outages were down 21% and the duration of the outages were down 40%. Where we make the investments work. We will work closely with the Public Service Commission and others as we evaluate credits, but I can't emphasize enough the answer to this is to invest in the system and make sure that we do it in a way that provides the reliable service to our customers that they expect.
Chairwoman, may I ask one brief follow-up question, please?
You may.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. I know we're limited. I want to be clear. I appreciate that, but that does not answer my question. What I am asking is, and I'll be as straightforward as I can, will DTE, and if so, how will DTE build into your internal financial structure and operations, which includes obviously your customers, and I know you mentioned your shareholders, how will you plan to build in a process to make customers whole again in the event of outages? Because we know this is going to continue to happen. Are you prepared to do that, and if so, how?
Right. Today, DTE does not request recovery of customer credits in any of our rate cases, so that is not recovered from our customers. Those are meant as a penalty, and they're not recovered as part of customer fees or any type of customer bills. One process that we currently have today to help customers that have these outages is we have a fleet of generators that we deploy into the field. We would like to continue to expand on that fleet of generators because we know it's a way to get power back to the customers that will have the longest outages. We also need to continue to work with our stakeholders, the Public Service Commission, and everybody else that's involved in our regulatory process to work on individual customer outages so that we can shrink the duration of these outages. I know I'm not directly answering your question, Representative, but it's not something we seek to recover from our customers, these penalties.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, I will wrap up because I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I would just like to say on the record that does not answer my question, so I will be following up with you.
I'd be happy to follow up. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation. You mentioned that shareholders also take a hit when you pay that $35 penalty. Yet in a recent article in Bridge, Michigan, and in my conversation with the DTE CEO, Jerry Norcia, yesterday, I understand that DTE really prioritizes shareholder earnings, even planning that figure in advance, which was made clear in the recent rate hike increase request. And that recent rate increase request, which if approved, of course, will increase our residential rates by 9%. And that's part of the goal of that is to help guarantee increasingly higher and higher dividends for shareholders in the years to come. And that seems to me problematic that ultimately, if the shareholders aren't taking that hit and they never see it because you keep their dividends the same every year and hope to increase them over the year, that doesn't seem like capitalism to me. It seems like what you're making happen seems unethical, that the executives are making millions of dollars a year. They cut jobs and services in support of higher shareholder earnings on the backs of already overcharged customers. And then the customers get an unreliable product that in some cases causes risk to their health and damages property. So I wonder if you could help me make sense of that. How can we have confidence in a company that seems to prioritize the shareholders over its own customers? If the product is not reliable, is not working, shouldn't the shareholders take a hit and then push DTE to do better and not just the customers and the politicians asking for help?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Representative. When we talk about stakeholders at DTE, we have 4 stakeholders that we highlight. Number 1 is our employees. We believe that everything starts with our employees. Number 2 is our customers. Number 3 is our communities. And number 4 are our investors. There's a handful of things you mixed in, so I'll do my best, and please come back and ask me a follow-up question. Today, the reliability of DTE's electric system is 99.9%. Best in class is 99.95%. That 0.05% is a huge difference between what we're delivering for our customers today and what we need to deliver for our customers. We recognize that's on us, and we need to do better to improve that. In terms of putting investors in front of our customers, I will tell you we do not do that. We do want to be a successful company. Utilities in America pay a dividend. Our dividend looks just like all of the other utility dividends that are paid out in America. People buy shares of utility stocks. They are retirees because next to government bonds, they are the most secure investment that you can possibly get. So we do not try to exceed dividends that other utilities do. We try to run in the middle of all of the packs. In terms of profitability, when we make capital investments in clean energy, renewable energy in our grid, that increases profitability for our company. So while we're making these investments, but that profitability, it really goes in 2 places. One, it goes to shareholders of our company, which tend to be a lot of retirees and others that own our shares. And secondly, it's what we call retained earnings. All of those retained earnings are put directly back in to work for our customers the next year. So I understand your question, but I will tell you that we do not prioritize our investors over top of our customers. The success of our company is measured by the ability for us to offer reliable service to our customers. And while we can be at 99.9%, that is not good enough for DTE, and we know we need to do better.
Thank you.
I just want to add that it appears, even though you say your investors don't come before customers, it really does appear in a lot of people's minds, because of the lack of reliability, because of the lack of compensation and what's lost, that is the appearance. And so that has to change too. Okay. We will now have the chair will recognize Representative Aragona.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here to answer these questions. Just kind of a quick follow-up, if you could go a little deeper on some of the statements you've made. Obviously, these ice storms, power outages, this is you're gonna see this on balance sheets across your company. So I was just wondering if you could go a little deeper into that. What is the expected result on profitability, and then how do you plan to handle that, and then ultimately what does that mean for the ratepayer going forward? And then you also mentioned a grid stability plan, I believe, that you had submitted back in 2021. Can you go a little deeper on that? What has worked, what hasn't worked? Obviously, if you're updating it in 23, there's going to be some changes. So is there anything maybe that could have been in there that would have resulted in a bit of a better result this year? So I was just wondering if you could go a little deeper on that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Representative. With regards to the financial effects of an ice storm, when utility rates are structured by the Michigan Public Service Commission, there's so much allowed what we call operating costs. In a storm like this, we have used all of the operating costs for recovery and storm-related expenses for the year. So now all of those expenses will go against our shareholders. So it's not only were we in a difficult financial position to start the year, this ice storm and the following intense snowstorm did nothing but magnify that process for DTE. Look, that's a process we own at DTE, and it's one that we're going to have to work our way through. We've got 10,000 really smart people that are focused on doing the right thing. So I hope I'm answering the first question, but these are not expenses that you go back and try to recover from customers in the future. That's not the way it works.
So it sounds like that the future, if you've already used up your operating costs, it's the future costs for the rest of your fiscal year. It's going to hit those retained earnings, and you're not going to be able to.
It'll hit the profitability of
Yeah.
the electric company. Absolutely, that's where it ends up, right? The second piece of your question was around the distribution grid plan. So the Michigan Public Service Commission asks all of the utilities, I believe all of the major utilities, to submit a distribution grid plan, and we've now submitted 2. At the end of this year, we will submit our 3rd. It lays out the overall condition of the electric system. It's 600-some pages long. It lays out the condition of all of the equipment. It lays out a 5-year investment strategy that we plan on, and it lays out a series of scenarios over 15 years on the investments you'll make on increasing weather risks, electrification risks, and other things that we see coming. It lays out all of the activities we're doing, from preventative maintenance to rebuilding circuits to highlighting automation. Are there things that we have laid out in there? So in our distribution grid plan, we're recommending that our strategic investment in the grid rise from $1 billion a year to $1.5 billion a year in the distribution grid plan, because we recognize we need to go faster to continue to solidify the grid. Inside of that, it continues to fund things. I mentioned things like pull top maintenance, absolutely critical for the health of an electrical system. We are trying to increase the cycle on how quickly we go through pull top maintenance on all of our system, and we need additional funding through that process to do all of the pull top maintenance on an annual basis that we need to accomplish. So it's a pretty detailed engineering document that lays out how we're trying to attack some of these issues, down to specific issues on individual customer outages. But that's what we do, and we work collaboratively with the commission and other stakeholders on that design of that program.
You're welcome. Chair recognizes Representative Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here today. I'm listening to what you're sharing, and I don't want to walk away from this committee and for the takeaway to be that what we're already doing is good enough, because I think our constituents feel that it's not, and I'm sure you understand that. We've heard about tree trimming, we've heard about preventative maintenance and upgrading the system, but I want to know when we have a failure that is this bad and this widespread, what are we going to do differently going forward? I mean, I've heard the term automation. I'd like for you to embellish on that, because I'm not clear on what you mean by that and how that's going to make a difference. And you used the stat that 95% of customers were restored within 3 days. I can tell you that in the community I represent, Wayne and Westland, that wasn't the case. We had people who had no power for 6, 7, 8, 9, even more than 10 days. So are you looking at that disparity across your coverage area? Are you looking at areas that were out for far longer than others? Are you going to be upgrading areas like mine that had far worse outages than some of the cities right next to me? Are you looking at, somebody like me, I can sit in the dark for a few days, I'm okay. But are you looking at people who might be on medical devices? Are you looking at areas where there's more senior citizens, or more hospitals, more nursing homes? So I want more clarity on this, because this is, for some people, this isn't just about food or not having heat. It's potentially life or death.
Right. Thank you for the question. It's an important one for me to address. So, Representative, as I dig in, I would agree with you that we need to continue to do more. The level of investment we're making today and the modifications we're making to our electrical system, while they are improving it, they're not improving it fast enough or widespread enough for our customers today. The area that you serve was one of the epicenters of where we had the heaviest ice that came in and we had the most damage. I believe all of our customers were restored in all of the ice storm in 7 days, but we had a series of customers when the heavy snow and the winds came back through that were re-affected by the next set of wind. So how do we start to tackle where we make investments? We have a technology team is the best way to look at it, that takes a series of data points. and they're outages, they're momentary outages, and we look at where we need to make those investments. Normally, you make investments based on a substation because a substation feeds anywhere from 8 to 10 circuits. So let's say up to 10,000 customers or communities is a nice way to think about it. We go in and we look at that, and you start to attack it from a substation basis and then out through all of the circuits. When we make filings with the Michigan Public Service Commission, we will come in and say, as an example, we'd like to rebuild the grid in Westland, and we will make as intelligent of an argument as we can on why we need to invest in that community. And we will seek to get a concurrence that we can invest in those communities to start to rebuild the system and add automation. When I mention automation, why automation is so important, there's two ways you measure reliability. One is the frequency of outages. While DTE can do much better on the frequency of outages, we're in the lower 50% of utilities, meaning we have less outages than 50% of the utilities in the United States. Where we are at the fourth quartile, or we are at the bottom of utilities, is how quickly we can restore those outages. So automation simply is this. We have a control room, and we have a lot of control room operators that sit there. Modern utilities have the ability to reroute power on their electrical system by opening devices and closing devices that sit on utility poles. By opening and closing devices, you can reroute the power. If there's a damaged section, you can close a device and reroute the power back across the electrical section. And instead of 1,000 people waiting for a crew to show up, you may isolate that outage down to 50 people, and the other 950 people get power back literally in minutes because we have control room operators that can reroute that. It goes after the duration of the outages. If we can start to reroute power and add all of these automation devices on our system, much like they've done in Chicago and other major urban cities that have a lot of the same outage frequency issues that we have, then you can take the crews you have and you can start to attack the individual outages in the areas where you have outages much faster. This is critical for us to bring the duration of our outages down for our customers so that people aren't losing the contents of their refrigerators. We don't have 7-day outages. So this is a critical, this automation strategy is a critical one for us to continue to invest in and to speed this investment. I've asked the team, we were going to do it as we rebuilt all of the circuits. I'm asking them now to pull it all into a 5-year window. I hope that answers your question, Representative.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate you acknowledging the severity, especially where I represent. And I hope that you mentioned making the case to focusing investment into these areas. I really hope you do that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Andrews.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, thank you for being here today. I have a question and then possibly a follow-up question to go with it. So I'm in sort of a unique position that I don't live in either the consumers or the DTE territory. I live in I&M's territory. But I do live right on Lake Michigan, and we get, I think anybody who's been there would acknowledge some of the worst storms in the state, often very suddenly. Lake effect happens without any meteorological warning often. And over the last 5 years, I personally have lost power twice. And in both times, my power was restored in about 5 hours. Now, I know that there's a difference in size between the I&M territory and the DTE territory, but the point I'm making is that I don't know that I&M trims trees better than you guys do, but I do think there is a choice being made about investment in the grid and stability in the grid that is not being made in other areas of the state. And I appreciate what you're bringing to the table and what you're saying about how you need to invest going forward, hardening the grid, underlining the lines. I think all of us acknowledge that that's critical and important, but this is a refrain that has been heard multiple times over the years. And while I think we all want to move forward in a way that, you know, is built in trust, I want to know what is your suggestion for accountability in this? How are we able to hold you accountable? How are you going to hold yourself accountable so that in 6 months, 8 months, 1 year, we're not just back here again having another hearing and having the exact same conversation once again?
All right. Thank you for the question around accountability. I've been asked this question multiple times. Our customers deserve to hold us accountable. This committee deserves to hold us accountable, and so does the state. The utilities need to continue to improve our restoration and the number of outages that we're having on our grid. One of the ways that we've explored accountability and had a series of discussions with the Public Service Commission in Michigan is around performance-based rates. Performance-based rates have been implemented in a handful of states around the country, and they've been implemented on everything from reliability issues to clean energy issues to electrification issues. There's multiple ways to implement performance-based rates. It is a collaborative that the Commission has started. We have been participating in that, and I think it's an appropriate way to hold the utilities accountable for the investments that they're making in the grid and to make sure that those investments are working for the customers. I will say less than half of our customers actually have an outage on our system every year. It may not feel that way if you have an outage on the DTE electric system, but less than half of our customers actually have an outage on our system on an annual basis.
And just as a follow-up then to that, because there's a lot of conversation about who you're accountable to, shareholders, ratepayers, et cetera. Just to be clear on the record, you are saying that as a publicly traded company, that if you make a decision that is in the best interest of your ratepayers and your customers who you prioritize, you will not be penalized for that by your investors and by your board and by your shareholders. Is that correct?
Right. So we talk about 4 stakeholders, Representative. First, it starts with our employees, and we believe if we do the right thing for our employees, they're going to do the right things for our customers. We ask our employees to volunteer and be very active. They live in these same communities that we're talking about. We want our employees to be ambassadors in the communities. And if we do those 3 things correct, then positive things will happen with our investors. And if we don't do those correctly, then positive things will not happen with our investors. That's the way it works in a publicly traded company. We have to offer reliable service to get the outcome for our investors that we expect.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative McFall.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here today. It has been my experience that DTE treats communities that are lower income different than more affluent communities. My district has a sizable low income population, and in your most recent rate case filing, you share data about reliability performance by census tract as a result of the Commission ordering you to do so. That data indicates that for 2 of the last 3 years, your performance in terms of actual average minutes without power was worse for communities in the 80 to 100th percentile of the MIEJ scores, with the worst disparity being in 2022. Why is it that your investments don't seem to be addressing these service disparities?
Representative McFall, can I ask where your district is?
My district is part of Oakland County and part of Wayne County. So I have part of Detroit, Highland Park, Hazel Park, Madison Heights.
Okay, thank you. I will answer that the company has very specifically focused our investments over the last 5 years in our communities with the most low-income customers. We have targeted not only our tree trim programs, but also our hardening programs and all of our preventative maintenance programs. If you look at our tree trim program, we are 96% on cycle inside of the city of Detroit, where we are less than 80% on cycle in some of the affluent communities. While it takes a while for those results to continue to show up, we have some other factors like we call it backlot construction. I apologize for a utility term. A lot of our infrastructure was built before the homes were built. So some of our infrastructure is now located in backyards and in what were alleys in the city of Detroit that makes it more difficult to access those. So we've worked collaboratively with the city to start to clean out those alleys and to trim everything and to remove everything back out of those alleys so that we can access our infrastructure so when somebody has an outage that we can get to it. But I can only assure you that our focus is we actually use the same screening tool as we make investments in our communities. Our intent is never to leave a community behind.
Well, is it fair then that these customers in these communities pay the same rates? I mean, for worse service?
Our bills are below the national average for the residential customers. I've heard a handful of things around rates. Electric customers in Michigan use the least amount of electricity of utilities in the Midwest, and we can get deeper on this. But you take the fixed cost and the amount they have, we believe a much better proxy is the average bill. Our average bill for our residential customers is below the national average. All of our customers representative deserve great service, and that's what we aim to provide to all of our customers. So I can only apologize to the customers that have had outages, but our intent is to bring all of the communities along as fast as we can. We use the My EJ screening tool that's been released not only by the federal government but also by the state to target our investments as part of our selection criteria on where you make those. And if you look at the statistics on how we're investing, we are very much focused on the communities that need us the most.
I'm not really sure that any of that answers my questions. I would like to follow up with greater detail. Thank you.
I would welcome that opportunity. Thank you.
Are there any? Oh, Chair recognizes Representative Woodson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question piggybacks on Representative Coleman, and that is our elderly, our frail, and children. And when it comes to those situations, that's what I received a lot of telephone calls on. So do you keep a database of those in that, especially since this has been going on for so long? Do you have a database? And you mentioned, if I may, Madam Chair, you mentioned generators. How many of those, again, do you have, and do they actually measure up to your elderly and your frail that you can offer those?
Yes, thanks for the question, Representative. Customers self-identify to DTE. We were allowed to keep that information. We work closely with DHS to get that information also, but customers have to self-identify to us if they're on oxygen or have some other type of emergency needs. When we get into a restoration priority, we focus on nursing homes, elderly care, hospitals. Those are some of the first customers that are restored. We also reach out to all of the homes that we know are low-income customers or where somebody's on medical needs to do what we call wellness checks. In this particular case, we did 90 particular customers where we either rolled a generator, we installed a generator at their home. We have a fleet of approximately 100 generators that we use. They're different sizes that can serve anything from an industrial customer down to a residential customer. And our goal is to try to get those out when we understand a customer is in need or needs help. What we found in this last ice storm, that 90 customers contacted us and we were able to help all 90 customers. So we're not allowed to keep that information unless a customer self-reveals that information to us.
Okay, I got that, and I completely understand that. Do you see an increase of those generators coming soon, especially since you're testifying and people will know that you have them? Do you see you obtaining an increase so that certain areas, certain districts, that we have access to those and we can make that telephone call and say, we have so many people that have that outage? I mean, I know it's a stretch, but I'm asking in hopes that that's a yes.
No, I actually think it's a great question, and I'm happy to address it. I mean, one of the strategies we have is to continue to increase the fleet and how we deploy generators in the middle of the process. We have to purchase the generators, you have to store the generators, and you have to have the right people that can actually deploy them. Because what I do, when you get into a restoration activity, the most precious resource you have is people that can actually do restoration activities. I'm not qualified to do it. There's a lot of people inside of our company that are not qualified to do it, but we do have a lot of people that are qualified. I need to make sure that we have partners that can install these quick connect generators to customers. We also need to make sure that the customers that we're installing them at are the ones that are most in need so that we can get it out that. But we have every intent. We've seen other utilities around the country also deploy these types of tactics to try to shorten the tails of these storms for the customers most in need. So I hope I'm answering your question. We have every intent of continuing to expand it. The size and the scale is something we'll have to work with our regulators on and the other stakeholders inside of our regulatory processes.
Thank you. Okay, Chair recognizes Representative Hill.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I also am not served by DTE, but we have a long experience in the Upper Peninsula with high rates. I do want to explore that average bill question a little bit more. When your rates are so high, you find every way you possibly can to reduce the use of electricity. So to use the average bill as a metric does not actually address the question of what your rates are. Could you please explain that?
Sure. Thanks, Representative Hill. So in Michigan, there's legislation that's passed to ask us to do energy waste reduction or energy efficiency for all of our customers. So DTE across our 2 utilities invests approximately $200 million a year, helping our customers reduce a minimum of 1% of our usage a year. And we've been asked by the Public Service Commission and agreed to now reduce that up to 2%. So what that does is reduces the amount of revenue that comes into a utility, and it helps our customers with energy efficiency. But what it also does is tell you to focus on the average bill, because what it says is if you apply energy efficiency overall, it will bring everybody's bills down, also knowing that the rate is going to go higher, because when you need to invest in your system, you have to go back and ask for rate increases instead of having the additional revenue that would come in that would pay for those investments. That's a decision as a state that we've made. I'm a huge fan of energy efficiency for our customers. It helps our customers tremendously that participate in those programs. But that's really how I think about the difference between rate and bill. Our goal is to hold bill amounts flat. That is the entire philosophy of an energy efficiency program, is that for those that are participating, their bill amounts continue to go down while their rates will continue to go up. We are somewhat unique with the level of energy efficiency that we go after in Michigan. We have the highest rate, along with Massachusetts in the United States, that we apply.
Thank you. Following up, the question of what the customers are expected to pay versus what the investors are expected. It's my understanding that DTE reported earnings of over $1 billion. And you're saying that $5 million is a hit to your company. Those numbers seem quite out of scale. If we're truly going to be making our customers whole when almost 1 million people have lost power, lost food, lost drugs, had to care for their children and their elderly, how are we going to make these people whole? Which is the question that's been asked by a number of my colleagues, and I don't believe has been addressed yet.
Yeah, thank you, Representative. So to go back and tell you again that I apologize for the outages, and we know the hardships that have come with it. When we invest in the electrical system or clean energy, that is how profitability is made at electric utilities, not only at DTE, but electric utilities across the country. We need to continue to invest in our electric grid to make it better. I am more than willing to sit down and have a discussion with this body or others on other ways. There are social service nets that have been put in place by other states that have hurricanes and other major weather events on a regular basis. It's not done through the utility, recognizing that the nature of the weather is going to continue to come. What you should expect DTE to do and the other utilities is continue to invest in the grid to make this situation better so that we limit the number of outages and we limit the duration of the outages. That's the number one thing as an organization that we can do.
Could you then explain how does DTE generate a profit if it doesn't? I think it's important to bring this into the room. How does a regulated utility, generate a profit versus service its customers?
The number one thing we try to do, Representative, is service our customers. And as I look at 2022, I think there's a lot of things that DTE and our 10,000 people should be really proud of that we did in 2022. And I won't go through the list. I understand the failure that we had with this ice storm. There is no amount of engineering that I can put on an electrical system that's going to keep our electrical system from failing with 3/4 of an inch of ice. But we must do better with the wicked weather that we have coming at us. In terms of generating a profit, when a utility invests capital, you earn a return, you earn the right to earn a return on that capital that you invest in a regulated utility. That capital return is set by the Public Service Commission through various rate proceedings that a lot of people participate in. In our last rate case, we had 27 different people that participated in that process. When we make earnings, those earnings are used for two things. One, they pay a dividend to the people that own our shares, and two, the money is pushed back into the company to continue to invest on behalf of our customers to increase the resiliency of our grid and the amount of clean energy that we're building and all of the other things that we're doing for our customers. I'm trying to answer your question. I hope I am.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to allow one more question from Representative McFall because we do have other presenters here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You just mentioned that there are other states that have created like basically social net or nets to assist residents that are lower income. Why should the taxpayer take care of that burden when it is the company's fault that the grid has not been updated in a proper manner? I don't understand why the taxpayer should take that fall and take that hit versus you, who made $1.2 billion in profit, and your shareholders.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Representative. So when I refer to the social nets that have been constructed, they've been in other states where you've seen weather. Our job at DTE is continue to work on the electric grid and to solidify the electric grid through the investments. The investments we're making today continue to make a difference in the outage statistics, not only the frequency of outage, but the duration of the outage that our customers are having. Again, I understand your point that it's not acceptable. We need to go faster. But as we look at the overall weather patterns that have come into the state of Michigan, all I can do is continue to rebuild the electric grid as fast as I can against these weather patterns. And then I work with the communities and the other social service agencies like the United Way and others to help get the funding and other sources to our customers. DTE has donated $60 million to social service agencies in the last 5 years to help our customers. We have had an unprecedented level. The highest level of low-income funding has come into our service territory in the last year because we advocate very strongly at the federal level to have that funding come in to help our customers. I think we play an important role, but I do not believe our company can be the social service net. We have to be a part of that, but we need to work with state and local governments on how that comes together.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much, Mr. Laura, for your presentation today and answering our questions. I think the major takeaway from this is that in order to quote our esteemed governor, we need to fix the darn grid and expand it. Okay, that's the takeaway. And this body is willing to work with you and PSC consumers in order to be able to do that. So thank you so very much today for your testimony. All right. Next, we're going to have Consumers Energy Senior Vice President Tanya Berry and Vice President Chris Laird. Can you please come forward? Please proceed.
All right. Good morning. Thank you, Chair Scott, Vice Chair Andrews, and Vice Chair Wenzel, and committee members for allowing me to come before you to testify today. I'm Tanya Berry. I'm Senior Vice President of Transformation and Engineering for Consumers Energy. I'd like to take a moment to share with you a little bit about my background. I was born and raised in Michigan, and I bring over 25 years of engineering solutions, not only to the utility, but I've spent time in the autos. At Consumers Energy, I'm responsible for our gas and electric engineering, as well as quality, as well as our transformation to renewables. I'm very excited when I think about our transition to renewables as we come off coal and move to clean energy. While the transformation is exciting at this time, what I think about every single day is how to provide clean, reliable, affordable, and safe energy to our 6.7 million gas and electric customers. Anyone who knows me and has worked with me knows that I put my heart into the work that I do, not only for my team, but for our company, for our coworkers, and our customers. I lead my team with joy. Leading with joy allows me to provide energy, clarity, and confidence to my teams. Leading with joy promotes a courageous and compassionate approach in my leadership that sustains purposeful action and creates a learning environment that allows us to continuously improve in the work that we do. Joy shows up for me in our commitment to serve my coworkers and our customers every single day, especially in times of hardship. I lead for people, all people, and that is top of my mind every single day in every decision that I make. It is also reflected in how I motivate my coworkers who are grinding it out in extreme conditions for 16 hours a day over the course of 10 days with multiple storm events restoring power for our customers. I empathize deeply with our customers who experience prolonged outages as a result of the ice storm that swept through Michigan. I, along with everyone else, from our call center representatives to the CEO, responded and talked with customers with the sole intent to better understand their experience that they faced and provide transparent updates to our restoration. The team I work with every single day puts the needs of our customers before their own. We often see the line workers out restoring power, and they are absolutely amazing. But I want you to know that there are thousands of coworkers behind the scenes working to support the line worker and reduce the restoration time for our customers. In storms like this, you'll find me in our emergency operating center. I'll go out and visit our dispatch teams, or I'll go in the field with our crews. In this particular storm, I went out and spent time with our crews. My goal in talking to the crews were ensuring they had everything they needed to ensure timely restoration, but also safe restoration. I had an opportunity to visit a crew in Jackson. They were installing a new pole in the community. I walked up to them, introduced myself, and recognized that that crew had anywhere from 15 to 22 years of service in our electric business. I asked them how it was going. They said, although the conditions are harsh, it's going incredibly well. We have what we need. We're getting the support that we need. The customers are great. They're bringing us food. They're thanking us, which makes our job a whole lot easier. In the middle of that conversation, I saw a car pull up, and a woman got out of that car. She was carrying what looked like coffee, and she waved me over. She didn't want to approach the scene due to safety reasons, so I walked over to speak with her. She said, I am the wife of one of those linemen. She said, I want everybody's power back, and I want my husband home safe. She said, we are two without power, and if I'm the last one, that's okay. I need him to come home. At Consumers Energy, we cannot control the weather, but what we can control is our response. Our vision is to perform at world-class levels while delivering hometown service. Whether that's a line worker on a pole, a dispatcher that's routing the job to another crew, an employee guarding a down power line, or a forestry worker that's clearing the trees to make way so we can get to that pole. We show up for our customers in all weather conditions, cold, rain, wind. To give you a brief description of our electric system, we have 90,000 miles of electric lines, more than 1,200 substations, and is made of high voltage distribution and low voltage distribution components, which is enough to wrap the earth 3 times around. Our network of distribution substations and smaller transformers step that electricity down progressively so we can safely deliver it to homes and businesses. Our analysis of recent weather patterns said the last 4 years have been the gustiest recorded in the past decade. In response to these increased wind speeds, we are requiring our standards to be updated, like stronger poles, utilizing automation where we can switch our customers over very quickly in less than a minute to an alternate power source. While we know we are making an important transition on the supply side of the business, it is equally important that we do the same thing on the grid side of our business. We have a plan to build out a harder and smarter system through our electric distribution plan. Consumers Energy has and we will continue to make major investments, spending hundreds of millions of dollars annually in our distribution grid for reliability for all of our customers. Because of our electric distribution plan, in 2022, we completed over 2,000 electric infrastructure projects, cleared over 7,000 miles of power lines, we replaced 10,000 poles, upgraded 100 substations, and continued to incorporate smart technologies to improve grid operations. This plan is a 5-year strategy to better define the condition of our system, determine the investments we need to make, determine where those investments are needed most, and assess maintenance requirements necessary to make dramatic reliability improvements our customers deserve. Our investments in reliability show us that we are headed in the right direction. However, because of the vast scale of our system, it will take dollars and time to complete. In 2022, we saw 20% fewer outages compared to 2021 after we made these significant upgrades to our system. We also reduced in half the total number of minutes customers were without power compared to the previous year. And more than 96% of our customer outages were restored in less than 24 hours, demonstrating continued investments in the grid with efforts to make it more reliable are paying off. Despite these investments, there are times in which extreme weather, ice, freezing rain, and wind can create substantial outages on our system, like what happened in last month's ice storm. I know how frustrating it can be to be without power. This is just the beginning, and I know our customers deserve better and expect better from us. As we learn from this storm and we improve for future events, we will continue to work with all stakeholders to make the needed investments across our electric grid to ensure we are clean, reliable, and affordable for all customers. This is our commitment. I would now like to turn it over to Chris Laird, our Vice President of Electric Operations, who could speak to the company's restoration efforts, including what we experienced in this ice storm, how we planned, and the challenges during the restoration process.
Thank you, Tanya. Chair Scott, committee members. My name is Chris Laird. I'm the Vice President of Electric Operations, including the oversight of construction, maintenance, and restoration activities for the company. I've been in that role since September of last year. I've been with Consumers 25 years, have 5 years of experience in utility prior to Consumers Energy, also a former volunteer firefighter. Throughout the course of my career, I've been fully involved in the restoration activity. I've sat on wire downs, both with the fire department and with the company. I've performed line work for this company and been out in some of our harshest conditions. I've traveled for hurricane assistance all across the country. I've ran our dispatch operations and actually physically sat and dispatched to our crews. I've sat in emergency management centers, city centers to make sure that I'm coordinating back and forth emergencies so that we take care of our customers as we go forward. I understand the restoration process fully. I know what it takes to prepare for the storm. I know the challenges that our crews face out in the field, and I know the damage that this does. I also know the impact it has on our customers. Specific to this event, I lived it for 10 days, 20 hours a day, out in the field every single day. I met with community emergency managers in our hardest hit areas. I met with customers in our hardest hit areas. I met with crews. I was in our dispatch centers, also in our command centers, to make sure that we were problem solving as we went forward. We had some issues throughout the course of it. I'll cover those as I go forward. To start, the storm was extremely unique. We were prepared, but severe weather created a number of distinct challenges for us. 3 waves of weather that hit us with 3/4 of an inch of ice, 45-mile-an-hour winds, and freezing rain hit us between the 22nd of February
and March 3rd. Over 485,000 total customers were out on our system. Our hardest hit areas were Kalamazoo, Hillsdale, Branch, Jackson, Lenawee, Washtenaw, Montcalm, and Newaygo counties. I personally had calls with all of the emergency managers for those counties, and myself and Greg Salisbury, the Vice President of Engineering, held calls with not only the county leaders, but all the township leaders in those counties as well to make sure we were prioritizing the challenges they were having as we went forward. I experienced it firsthand while out in the field what the damage was like. As I went to our mobile command centers in Kalamazoo on day 2 of the storm, I couldn't get into the mobile command center in the route that I took because of the amount of trees that were down across roads. I met the emergency managers on site at our mobile command center and worked with them to make sure that we were prioritizing getting out to get critical infrastructure back on in those communities. Ice of that thickness doesn't just damage electric lines. It takes down mature trees, tree limbs, poles, and cross arms, all of which create an outage for our customers. We saw 4 times as many wire downs in this storm as we typically do in a major windstorm that occurs in the summer months in Michigan. We make it a priority to go out and put eyes on every single wire down, make sure that they're safe to the public, and make sure that they're safe for our crews. Our priority is to relieve any situation where a public safety officer may be. We code those wire downs separately. We call into the 911 centers and emergency manager to make sure we're relieving the police and fire units that are on those wire downs so they can go take care of the critical needs of their communities. Our expertise is in preparation. We exercise the same process that we do for every other storm, including looking at staffing in the field and staffing in the office. We increased our resource response by tripling the field workforce, so we prepared ahead of time, brought in 300 crews, brought additional 200 crews in, and then as we saw wave 2 coming in, we brought an additional 100 crews because we had to move those resources to another area, but we did not want to take away from the hardest hit areas that experienced the first wave of outages. We operate as an all hands on deck. That's not just field employees. We had 4,000 employees that were involved in this. 3,000 field employees and 1,000 folks in the office or out serving the 9 community events that we did, contacting the emergency management teams and making sure that we're coordinating as we go forward. Our goal from the first wave of weather was to have majority of our customers on by Sunday night. We achieved that with 98%. That being said, 2% were out in the hardest hit areas. And I know the frustration that causes for our customers in those situations. We had 84 crews on a 72-mile stretch because of the amount of services down to homes, the amount of wire downs that were there, and the amount of tree work that was there. I was personally on site in those locations multiple times throughout the storm. As Tanya mentioned, our crews work 16 hours on, 8 hours rest. We also stagger the crews so we have 24/7 response to make sure that we're able to take public safety into hand and make sure that we're working through our critical and priority customers. We continued to work 24/7 until every last customer was restored. The crews trained for this, they're used to it, they're prepared for it, as well as our office staff. However, restoration jobs can only move quickly when the job site is clear. And in some cases, after the rain came, after the ice melted, places that were fields became lakes. Places that were streams became rivers. So we had to mobilize amphibious vehicle, boats, and flex track equipment in order to help restore in those hardest hit areas. The advantage of consumers is we have resources all over the state, and we were able to mobilize those resources from the northern territory that was not impacted into our southern territories. In certain areas, we had reports of significant amount of services down to homes. Knowing those challenges, again, we placed multiple crews per mile to make sure that we could take care of those. Areas that had the most impact were in the Hillsdale and Reading areas. We had over 189 crews in those areas and made sure they stayed there until every last customer was on. The damage was serious. Our crews experienced many challenges but performed at a high level. We replaced cross arms, transformers, and restrung nearly 95 miles of cable throughout that, repaired switches as well. Our restoration efforts continued despite increased rains and higher wind speeds. We have OSHA standards. When winds get above a certain threshold, we are not allowed to fly our buckets for safety reasons. We experienced that 3 times throughout those 8 days. That caused additional challenges for us as well. I cannot stress this point enough. Safety is our top priority for the public, for our crews, for our employees. It is important that everyone go home safe at the end of the day. With any major event, we conduct an internal after-action review. We have 2 of those in flight as I speak. one of those on our system integration and our technology, and one on our restoration management philosophy. We will continue to learn from this, continue to get better, but a couple areas that I want to address and acknowledge with you. So our estimated time of restoration, ETR process we call it. So it's the time that a customer would get notified they expect to get restored. We had some issues with that system throughout the storm. With the volume of outages that we had, customers were getting inaccurate estimated time of restorations, saying they wouldn't be on for days later when they would have been on sooner. We also had challenges where customers said they were back on and they weren't. We found that defect throughout the course of the storm. We tried to make a fix in it, but we couldn't do so. We had to wait until customers were restored. We fixed that on March 8th. That will not happen again for us as we go forward. We also know that we had challenges when it comes to our outage map. So our outage map, when you look at the polygons, the color-coded areas on that map, we're staying out even though we were restoring customers out. I want to make sure and say we never understated what we had out. That always showed worst case scenario for us. We found a couple of data defects as we were working through our new ADMS system. We are working to get those corrected, so that is no longer an issue as we go forward. I want to be clear and reiterate this point. We never understated the customers we had out. Every time you looked at an outage map or there's a poweroutage.us app that people use, those numbers are inflated from what we actually had out as we go forward. We've already begun working with our operations team to repair the defect. We'll make sure that we take care of that as we go forward. We also have our engineering teams in the hardest hit areas down in Hillsdale reading, looking at that system and looking at how we can immediately make changes so that those customers do not experience the duration of outages as we go forward. We recognize the impact that this had on our customers. We appreciate their patience as they've gone forward. We're truly sorry. We will learn from this as we go forward. I want to close with this. I want to stress how historic the storm was. Whether it was the weight of the ice on the lines, pole snap, wires on the ground, heavy rain, strong winds, trees, getting up in the bucket, whatever happened, our service territory was heavily damaged. Yet despite these obstacles, our crews persevered. Our restoration teams continually assessed damage and routed increasing number of line workers to get most pressing jobs. I'm very proud of the men and women at Consumers Energy and how they responded. For more than 135 years, Consumers Energy has been dedicated to world-class reliability performance. That dedication will continue. We did not hit that mark here. We will continue to strive to get better every single time. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you, and at this time, Tanya and I will open up for questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And I do want to add, you're correct. The linemen were the true heroes in this whole situation with consumers and also DTE. I was in constant communication with consumers along with DTE and was well informed as to what was happening along the way. And really, they did an outstanding job. And just really want to, acknowledge those linemen and thank them and the ones that came from out of state. And it was just amazing. Okay, so let's open it up to questions. All right, Representative Burns.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you both for the presentation and your comments this morning. So I'd like to start by just acknowledging the elephant in the room, which is climate change. We keep referring to these ice storms and these weather patterns that we're seeing as historic or perhaps once in a generation. But we know that that's simply not the fact. This is literally the tip of the iceberg. And these ice storms and other, I would say, irregular weather patterns are becoming more regular for us. So can you talk to us about what you are doing to prepare specifically for more ice? And then can you also talk to us about what companies in other Midwestern neighboring states are doing? Because we know that Michigan customers are disproportionately impacted by power outages, where in nearby Midwestern states, the damage and the impact is not as significant in terms of the number of outages or the length of outages.
Thank you for the question. I'll take that one. So as I talked about our electric distribution infrastructure investment plan, we continue to make updates to that. Right now, we're actually in the middle of updating that plan to resubmit to the MPSC. The things we look at is what have we been seeing in weather and how are standards and technology increasing across the industry. We do benchmark and learn, take best practices across the industry for states that have seen more severe weather ahead of us, like in the south or maybe even over to the west of us a little bit. And those are what we build into the plan. And things we mentioned before, like stronger poles, hardening technology, and even exploring and considering what does underground look like. Now, when we think about undergrounding, we definitely have to be very strategic about that. And right now, at Consumers, we're in the middle of a $2.5 million pilot where we're doing some undergrounding to see what that looks like across our system and how that'll take our customers. So what we do after every event, as Chris mentions, we take a look back. We say, how do we need to invest? What do we look like? What does the system need to look like in the future? And that is part of the plan, and we're updating that plan. So although we wrote our first plan in 2021 and submitted it, it's time for us to take a look. So when I talk about continuously improving, we're learning from every experience, every weather event, and we're also using predictive analytics, not only to say, what are we going to do in 3 years? What are we really thinking about 10 to 15 years from now?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that response. I know you mentioned that you are looking at kind of industry-wide best practices. Can you share what those consist of with us, if they are in addition to the things that you've mentioned already?
You know, there is the things I already mentioned, hardening poles, putting the technology on the system. It is strengthening what we have and exploring undergrounding. I know that other states have a lot more undergrounding in terms of what we do, and we're exploring right now what's right for us and what does that mean for the state of Michigan. And we're working with the Michigan Public Service Commission because, let's face it, we can't underground everywhere, but we need to be strategic and thoughtful how we invest those dollars to do that. So those are the practices and those are the standards that are across other states, and we will continue to learn and grow from there and continue to monitor whatever else comes out because we know technology changes and grows as well.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Minority Vice Chair Wenzel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for being here. Unfortunately, after this last ice storm, not everybody made it home safely. Lieutenant Quillen from Paw Paw, a firefighter, passed away from a downed consumer's power line. So my question has to do with future infrastructure, I guess. And right now in Van Buren County, consumers plans on deploying the Crandall power line that runs through most of the county. We know from this ice storm that down power lines are obviously unsafe, and that's where a lot of these outages seem to be coming from. So what are we doing in the future? Why isn't that one being buried, and what are we doing in the future to address this?
Yeah, let me first start by just saying how sorry I am for Lieutenant Quinlan. Being a former volunteer firefighter, I know the sacrifices that they make to go out and serve their communities, and we're just deeply saddened by that. And we went through the investigation process. Our system did operate as it should, but unfortunately, Lieutenant Quinlan passed away. So just condolences to him, his fellow firefighters, his family, and his friends. As we continue to work through the 20-mile-long line that you referenced, we're working through just our easements, how we can go about doing that. We looked at an overhead just from a cost perspective. That's really the main reason that drove that line for us. So we're continuing to work through that.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you on that. I know we have a lot of constituents that are very upset about that. Thank you.
So let me ask this. My understanding is that Consumers Energy is currently spending around $100 million to $150 million annually on tree trimming, which is really significant from the last 10 years. Are you suffering from a lack of consistency on spending on tree trimming in prior years?
Yeah, so we're spending $100 million, as you said, right now, trimming about 7,000 miles of line every single year. Our plans are to get up to 8,000 miles. That gets us on a 7-year trim cycle, which we've learned through benchmarking with our utilities and through EPRI, a nationwide organization that many utilities share best practices on. That's the right plan for us to get on. A few years ago, we were only trimming 5,000 miles a year. So yeah, we're playing catch up. We have 54% of our system on that 7-year trim cycle. And within the next 2.5 years, we'll have the entire system on that 7-year trim cycle. And that's very important for us.
Chair recognizes Representative McFall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question regarding credits for your customers and why they weren't voluntarily automatically applied like DTE did. Can you explain why that is and why it's only $25 still?
So $25 is a standard that we follow that's set by the Michigan Public Service Commission. Right now, we are proactively processing credits for those customers that were out 5 days or longer on our system. Now, we are open to standard changes that the Michigan Public Service Commission is exploring and look forward to working with what those changes may be in the future.
So you have no plans to voluntarily help out the customers that went without
We're
power?
proactively, actually, right now, those that were out 5 days, we're going to apply a $25.
Without them having to apply for
Correct,
it? Okay,
correct.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Chair recognizes Representative Schmaltz.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here. I do live in Jackson, and as you mentioned, we were hit very, very hard. And I have to say, I heard from a lot of constituents thanking you for doing all that you did. There were crews everywhere, and I can, I saw that myself. So I just want to applaud you for that. Also, the communication, Chair Rogers was talking about that. We were kept in communication with the utility the whole time so we could relate to our constituents what was happening. And I really do appreciate that because I think that's so important. And of course, DTE did that also. So I applaud you for that. What can we do to help accelerate the process of the reliability of the grid? Obviously, we still have a lot of work to do. There were customers out for a long time. Although, like I said, your crews were everywhere, and I do applaud you for that. And, of course, the safety. Talking about downed wires, I don't know how many times that was heard in our community, and we related that information, too, because safety is so important. And we were hit very hard, and there were wires everywhere down at Jackson. But what can we do to help accelerate this process so that the grid can be more reliable in the future?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the recognition of all of our hard coworkers that are out there making sure that power is restored. What can we do? We all want the same thing. No one wants the lights to go out. We all want a reliable grid, every single one of us. And I think that's something we all can agree on. What we need to do is work together to make sure all stakeholders need to work together to make sure we're supporting the proper investments that need to happen so that we can have the reliable grid. That is what we all need to do. And we all need to remember we're standing for the same thing. No customer without power ever is the North Star. And it is supporting those investments that will be important to us, all stakeholders.
If I can add to that, encourage folks to get involved in technical skills. So we've hired 411 apprentices into our system, or will be over the next 3 years. Already have added 200 to that. It is getting harder and harder for us to be able to track folks to do line work. So anything you can do in your communities to encourage that would be greatly appreciated. There's dozens of community colleges across the state that have this program already, and we partner with veterans. So folks that are coming out of the military looking for work, we've hired 48 of those folks to come in our apprenticeship program to do line work. So anything you can do from that standpoint will help us out as well. Those are the folks we need to build this infrastructure that we're talking about. And then if there are outages in the future, have them there to quickly respond.
Chair recognizes Representative Andrews.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for being here today. I appreciate the expression of concern for the linemen and the workers out there. I mean, as Representative Wenzel said, we lost a firefighter in our neck of the woods, and it's obviously tragic. And to me, the best thing we can possibly do for our first responders and linemen is harden the grid and improve reliability to ensure that they're not out there working in these extreme conditions and working these long hours away from their families. That said, as I asked DTE earlier, the problem seems to be that there's always a plan to do more, a plan to do better, but the accountability factor is what seems to be lacking, and what keeps bringing us back to these sorts of hearings over and over and over again, having the same conversations about 5 and 10-year plans. The representative from DTE mentioned the possibility of maybe moving to a rate structure that puts performance first, performance-based rate plans. How does Consumers Energy feel about that sort of rate structure, that sort of accountability structure? Is that something that you guys would support moving towards?
We are very open to having that conversation and coming to the conversation with all stakeholders regarding that. We've actually been in some early conversations around that, and so I think as we look across that, there's many ways that that can be done. So I think as we take a look at it collectively across the utilities, that is something we can work towards. Yes.
Well, it sounds like we've got some consensus. Maybe we need to put a group together.
I think we do.
And with that, let me just add, accountability, no, we hold ourselves completely accountable to after the storm, because we do not sleep at night knowing that our customers were without power for multiple days. And as Chris mentioned, we're back actively working to say, how does that not happen again?
Thank you.
Okay, Chair recognizes Representative Hill.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today. And I do want to recognize that we have community members here in the room, and I do look forward to hearing from them directly from them about the impacts that it had on their lives. $25 for $25 for 5 days is $5 a day. Eggs cost $6 a dozen. I do not understand how, if you are, and I hear the hard work, and I certainly respect and honor the linemen and the incredible physical work and the impact on the infrastructure. But we're talking about money, and I believe consumers made $800 million in profit. The question then is $5 a day to $800 million in profit for folks who have lost medicine and food.
We apologize and deeply empathize with our customers that have lost medicine and food. $25 a day, $25 for those that have lost power for 5 days at $5 a day, as you mentioned, is the current standard that is set by the Michigan Public Service Commission. We are open to having additional discussions in terms of what that could look like in the future. There's also a balance, though, in terms of returning to our customers and making the investments in our grid so that they never go out again. So we don't even have to have a credit conversation.
Thank you. I just find the notion that companies are, that accountability, we keep hearing about that accountability rests with the Public Service Commission. At what point does it rest with the company and its shareholders? Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation today. One thing you mentioned, line workers. I did hear from the DTE CEO yesterday that they're training returning citizens, and that might be a really good way to go if you're not doing that already. It's so hard to understand, how in such a specific case as these ice storms, how the consumers' energy did and how DTE did, because it's so hard to compare apples to apples. But I understand that 250,000 consumers' energy customers, about 1 in 7, lost power during the ice storm 3 weeks ago. And right next door in southwest Michigan and northern Indiana, they only about 3,000 customers lost power, which was 1 in 200. And that area was also hit by the same ice storm, a lot of the same weather coming through that band. Just wondering if there is something that Indiana Michigan Power is doing to prioritize reliability that may not be happening with consumers' power. Can you address that?
Yeah, I'll start with, as the ice came through, northern Indiana did see similar icing to us in a very small region, but the majority of the state did not see the same level of icings. And that's the unique thing around ice storms. They're really concentrated to specific areas, and it's temperature specific. A half a degree makes a big difference. So I don't know what Indiana AP is doing and how they're working through their resiliency. We can look through that in benchmarking. We absolutely will do that as we go forward, but this was really specific to our region. I know as we came out of wave 1 and wave 2 and wave 3 hit and we saw snow, wet, heavy snow across our region, states like Kentucky had 450,000 customers out, Tennessee had 250,000, and many others. So I think it really was specific to the type of weather and where it exactly hit throughout that.
And just so you know, those numbers do come from just that northern band of Indiana.
Yep.
That would be great if you could see what they're doing. Thank you.
I have a quick question as well. In the past 10 years, it's my understanding that Consumers Energy and also DTE have received 8 electric rate increases. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so also, in fact, the last 10 years, Consumers Energy has received $663 million in rate increases, and DTE has received about $1 billion in rate increases. Would you say? I know you can't speak for DTE, but for yourself.
Yeah.
Would you say that's correct? Okay. All right. Just thank you for that. Chair recognizes Representative Green.
Thank you for coming today. I know it's not easy sitting in front of us and the committee because our constituents ask us to get our pound of flesh, essentially, is what we need to do today. And I don't want to repeat, some great questions have been asked, but I do have a specific one about the ready-to-serve charge and then the other fees that are tacked onto bills. Are those still charged to customers who were without power? So I know we're talking about the penalty and everything, but at the same time, I think we are looking for solutions for relief. And I also look forward to this committee that we will get together at looking for solutions. But are there other measures of relief that you're able to provide customers who didn't have service? Instead of that, like as Rep. Hill said, the $5 a day, but we do pay a ready-to-service fee. We do pay other fees, and since they didn't have that service, are the companies able to provide relief for that?
So when we look at the bill credit, that is our first means and standards in which we credit the bill. But in 2022, we agreed to provide $15 million for bill credits benefiting all customers this year and $10 million in shareholder-funded contributions. And our customers will begin to see that through the bills over this year. I think what you're saying is we have to really talk about the solutions of the future and really what we do. But today we're operating under the current standards and rules that exist.
Yes, that too, but since they have to pay that ready-to-service fee, is there a way that they don't have to pay that since they didn't have power?
Right now we have the credit, and I think we'll have to look at that in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Neely.
Thank you. I just want to say I appreciate you guys and all the hard work you're doing. My question is, what programs are there out there for small businesses? And when their businesses are forced to be closed over a period of time, do you guys have a funding credit for them as small businesses?
Our small businesses are all assigned to our business center, so they have dedicated help that they can work through, and there's multiple programs that they can work with. I am not familiar off the top of my head with all the options that they have for that. That is absolutely something we can follow up on, but there is services offered for them.
Thank you. I would love if you can, follow up with me with that. We have a lot of small businesses that's been calling me and asking me questions on the credit issues, and so that would be great if you can get back with me. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. No more questions? Oh, Representative McBall, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to go back to the credit as well, and because you had mentioned that that's set by the MPSC, but that's the floor, because DTE is doing 35, which, to be quite honest, isn't a whole lot more, but it's a gesture. Why is it that you're not voluntarily increasing it, especially when, like Rep. Green mentioned, people are paying a fee already?
So right now, there's a pending proposal to raise to $35 with the MPSC, and we support that proposal. If there's more discussion that needs to be had in the future, we will be at the table to have those discussions in the future.
Right, but you could though do it voluntarily, especially even if it was just for a PR stand.
Right. So if you listen to where I mentioned, we agreed to provide $15 million in bill credits to all customers. That's voluntarily. We also are taking $10 million in shareholder funded investments to give to credits to our customers. Those are things that we do voluntarily.
I don't think that's enough, but thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Recognizing that we also do have a customer comment, but we will be having that after our next presenters, I want to thank you all both for being here today and giving testimony. So we're going to wrap this portion up right now. Thank you so much. Okay, next we're going to have the Michigan Public Service Commission, Chief Operating Officer Mike Byrne and Commissioner Catherine Petrick. Can you please come forward? Please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Scott, Majority Vice Chair Andrews, and Minority Vice Chair Wenzel, and members of the committee, for the opportunity to join you this morning to talk about the recent power outages and the steps that the Commission is taking to address the very real reliability challenges that we're facing here in Michigan. I'm Commissioner Catherine Petrick, and joining me this morning is MPSC Chief Operating Officer Mike Byrne, and Commissioner Tremaine Phillips was also able to join this morning. I also want to point out our legislative liaison is in the audience, Rika Holly-Velker, so please feel free to reach out to her should you have any questions following today. I have a brief presentation this morning, and then we're more than happy to take any questions that any members might have. I want to be very clear starting off that myself and my fellow commissioners, Chair Scripps and Commissioner Phillips, find the current state of electric reliability in far too many areas in Michigan to be unacceptable. Outages occur far too frequently, impact far too many people, take far too long to restore, and even worse, downed wires have cost far too many lives. This is our number one priority at the Commission. We didn't get into this situation overnight, and it's not acceptable. The utilities need to get better at anticipating and responding to the situations that arise. I deeply appreciate your interest as a committee in partnering to effectuate real change in our utilities' reliability and storm response. As a regulator, my presentation this morning is different. But before getting into the causes of the current reliability situation and the Commission actions to address it, it's important to understand the role and the authority that the Commission has, because it's not boundless, and we take very seriously both the responsibility delegated to us by the legislature and its limits that have been placed on that authority. The MPSC regulates all investor-owned utilities that provide service in the state of Michigan. In serving this regulatory function, the Commission sets rates for investor-owned utilities, or IOUs, like consumers and DTE, based on reasonably and prudently incurred costs for the utilities to serve their customers, plus a reasonable profit. We also set standards of service. These include rules on consumer standards and billing practices, technical standards, service quality and reliability standards, and interconnection standards. The MPSC is a creature of statute and has only the authority provided by the legislature. So everything that we do as it relates to the regulation of the utilities must be rooted in our statutory authority. MCL 460.6 gives the Commission a pretty broad grant of authority, but the courts have stepped in and limited this authority in some pretty impactful ways. Specifically, the Commission does not have the authority to make management decisions for the utilities. We can decide whether expenditures made in accordance with those management decisions are reasonable and prudent, and deny recovery of costs if they're not, but we can't make those decisions for the utility. The ability for utilities to recover costs is tied to Commission review and approval. So we can and do set the rates that the utility charges customers, but under Michigan law and traditional rate-making practices, we cannot directly tell them where to spend that money that they get from rates. So for example, if we approve an investment for IT infrastructure, we cannot mandate that the dollars approved are in fact spent on IT infrastructure. That's a management decision that the company makes. So from a practical standpoint, as it relates to reliability, what does this mean? It means that any response from the Commission or action by the Commission has to be rooted somewhere in our statutory authority and is constrained by the limits on that authority. And all the actions and solutions that I'll present to you this morning fit within these constraints. When we talk about improving reliability, understanding the leading causes of our reliability issues is vital. You can't identify the solution if you don't properly identify the problem. So I want to talk about leading causes of outages that we're aware of right now. First, the increasing frequency and severity of storms, poor vegetation management, and the aging distribution infrastructure. When we talk about distribution infrastructure, this is the poles, the wires, the transformers, substations, and other physical pieces of the system that distributes the electricity that goes to our houses. Some of these are quicker, easier, and less expensive to fix than others. For instance, tree trimming is far less expensive proposition than building a new substation. The graph shows the recorded increase in extreme weather that's up on the screen right now. Not only is this weather becoming more extreme, but it's also coming more frequently. Utility preparation for this increasingly predictable extreme weather and mitigation of these impacts is critical. One way that we can address the impacts of these types of events is through proper vegetation management or tree trimming. Trees account for the vast majority of outages on both the DTE and consumers' energy systems. If you think about the results of the ice storm, most of the damage was caused by falling tree limbs. I know no one likes tree trimming. Rarely do the trees look better after they're trimmed. In fact, they typically look pretty awful. But we get complaints about that at the MPSC all the time as well. But the data speaks for itself. In reports we required the utilities to file in November of last year, tree trimming showed dramatic improvements in circuit reliability, both in the frequency and the duration of outages. Taking just one example from the reports, customer interruptions were reduced by 74% in the first year after tree trimming on the DTE system, and the length of outages that did occur reduced by 67%. That's just from trimming the trees. All of the work that we do at the MPSC is in the public, so if you would like to see the results yourselves, you can look up case number U21305 in our docket system and find the reports from all of the utilities and dig into it if you or anyone you know is interested. The situation we're currently facing with poor reliability didn't happen overnight. The Commission has been looking at reliability issues, both storm-related reliability and non-storm related reliability more closely. Pre-2021 Commission action on reliability issues included the things that are listed on the screen there, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to walk through each one of them to try to get to questions in our next commenters. But unfortunately, this hasn't worked. While the utilities have been taking actions to improve reliability over the last several years, our statewide reliability measures have gotten worse or remain stagnant. Past Commission reviews have not brought us to where we need to be. So we decided that more needs to be done. The summer 2021 storms and the outages that followed spurred additional action from us at the Commission, specifically around data to help us better understand the system. And I want to highlight one quote here from our order. I am going to read it. The Commission and the utilities must do more and must do it faster. We need more data on what is being done, more transparency around planning, and more engagement in how to best prepare and harden Michigan's distribution system. We also highlighted a need to put customers at the center of the discussion. In this order, we requested a few things to help understand baselines and options for how to improve. First was reporting on reliability, resilience, and readiness for extreme weather events. Information on cost, maintenance, reliability, and safety of undergrounding overhead electrical lines. We invited the public to comment on the utilities' filed distribution plans, and we set up a two-part technical conference that allowed us to recruit experts throughout the country to help provide ideas on how to improve our reliability in Michigan. After reviewing these reports and hosting that technical conference in March of 2022, we took several more actions related to data collection and public availability and accessibility of the reliability data. This includes a new webpage that will be hosted on the MPSC's website to display regulated utilities distribution system data on reliability, on customer outages, and on storm response. This is brand new. It's not up yet. It's going to go live next Friday, March 24th. So I encourage you to take a look at that time. The first data submissions from the utilities are due May 15th, so a little bit after, and will include very detailed and extensive reliability data from all the regulated utilities for January, February, and March of this year for Q1. This is new. It's going to be posted publicly on our website shortly thereafter. This is the first time that data like this has been made accessible. And I strongly believe in doing our work in public and being open with the residents of Michigan about the state of the electricity system that they pay for. I believe that posting data publicly will allow residents, media, researchers, and legislators like yourselves to dig further into the issues and help shine a light on these areas for improvement. These actions that we've taken last year, and combined with the actions taken by the Commission over the last 8 years or so in other proceedings, were taken with the intention of pushing the utilities to improve the reliability of their systems. I wanted to give you a sneak preview of what the reliability reporting template is going to look like that we're requiring the utilities to fill out each month. So the whole template is much too large and detailed to show in a presentation like this, so I picked one section showing reliability data broken down by census tract. This is maybe 10% of the total reporting template, but for those of you with very good eyes, you'll be able to get the flavor of what we're asking for. On the reporting template, it goes into how long it takes for downed wires to be guarded, broken down by census tract. How many customers are restored in 36 hours or less in a variety of weather conditions, again, broken down by census tract, so you can really dig into the details. The number of customers experiencing 4 or more sustained interruptions, how many miles of tree trimming has occurred in each census tract, and you'll also notice the performance standards are on the very bottom line there. This is the overall benchmark that the utilities need to meet according to our rules. And I'll talk more about these service quality rules and the changes that we're making next. All this data that we'll get from this reporting template will allow us to prioritize where the work needs to be done. So these are those service quality rules updates that I just mentioned. So it's part of our job at the MPSC to issue standards for distribution system service quality and reliability. We've run an extensive stakeholder input process that included community groups, organizations, customers, the Attorney General, and have revamped the rules to tighten and improve these service quality rules in a number of ways. I've included a few of the key improvements on the slide here for you, but there are many more that are in the details of the rules themselves. So first, you'll see the rules on customer restoration times in the upper left. Looking at the catastrophic category, just as an example, and catastrophic would be a situation like the recent ice storm that we've been talking about. Our current rules set the restoration time for 90% of customers at 60 hours. With the new rule set, this will be reduced to 48 hours. Similarly, the time for responding to wire downs is reduced in the revised rules, this one by half, from 360 minutes to 180 minutes for non-metropolitan areas. There are 2 revisions to outage credits as well. The first is a customer credit based on the duration of an outage. In the current rules, utilities must pay a total of $25 to a customer if they meet the outage length requirements outlined here and if the customer submits a request to the utility asking for their credit. There's been extensive questions about this in the previous 2 presentations. In the revised rules, the outage lengths are shortened. The credit is increased to $35 per day, so not total, but $35 per day that you're out, and indexed to inflation, and they're made automatic. You no longer have to ask the utility for it. There are also increased automatic credits to customers who experience high numbers of repetitive interruptions. So this was a 3+ year process to get to where we're at today with these rules. The formal rulemaking process for the state is lengthy. It involved extensive stakeholder outreach and input at the beginning of the process, thorough vetting of the changes, and then a lengthy process with JCAR, the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, and we expect to be in the position to issue the final rule set by next Friday. In response to the outages we saw last August and the related wire down fatalities and critical injuries, the Commission issued a new order at its October 5th, 2022 Commission meeting, further addressing reliability issues, taking what our Chair Scripps referred to in his comments as a, quote, new approach. I wanted to take a minute to walk through what this new approach looks like. We listed a number of items that we have required of the utilities in prior investigation-related orders, including reports, actions required of the utilities. Under the new order, DTE and consumers were directed to file a report providing an update on the current compliance with all of those prior directives and commitments. This includes reporting on current compliance with various commission rules related to grid operations, performance, and safety, as well as various issues related to the identification of and the response to downed wires. These reports are all available publicly at the docket listed here, U21305. Second, we initiated a third-party independent audit of the operations of the Consumers Energy and DTE distribution systems. This is the first time that has been done in the state of Michigan. There is a never-before-used provision in statute that allows us to do this. And given the lack of progress that the Commission has been able to make over the last years of quote-unquote storm investigation after quote-unquote storm investigation, we decided it was time to utilize all the tools that we have available. I'm going to go into a bit more detail on the utility audit on the next slide. So this is a big one. Understanding the root cause of poor system reliability in Michigan is absolutely critical to getting the solution right. We don't want to simply treat symptoms. We need to treat the cause, and that means ensuring that we understand it. The audit that we ordered late last year will get us these answers. This utility audit will be conducted by an independent third-party consultant. The request for proposals for this audit was issued through DTMB 2 days ago on Monday, with responses to the RFP due on April 25th. The audit, which will consist of a full engineering audit as well as an audit of internal policies and procedures, has a number of pieces, including a physical audit of existing installed infrastructure to ensure compliance with applicable engineering standards, and a comparison to the performance and condition of distribution systems of similarly situated utilities. Some of the questions that we're asking the auditor to answer are on the screen here. So does existing installed infrastructure match the company's internal records? Do actual infrastructure measurements comply with the company's engineering standards? How does the distribution system infrastructure compare to other utilities in similar climates and situations? Representative Burns and McDonald, this goes to your previous questions. And this is among other questions. I just chose a few to put on the screen here. Part 2 is an audit of utility programs and processes, including emergency preparedness, storm restoration, distribution system maintenance, and weather investments are sufficient and equitable, and whether they properly plan for climate change and changing load profiles. This includes a review of the company's engineering standards and inspections and maintenance programs, a review of accounting processes for the distribution system to ensure accurate management and recording of costs, a review of distribution system management, including how maintenance priorities are determined, how personnel are managed during outage recovery, and company management and internal policies and procedures regarding outages, distribution management, safety, and planning. Answering the questions that are on the slide here. So we're focusing on identifying the actions necessary to reduce the number and duration of outages and determining needed safety improvements. We're also asking the auditor to present best practices that are utilized by other utilities in the industry and expected impacts of the utility's current investment and improvement plans. Once a contract is executed, the auditor will have 1 year to complete the work. It's a lot of work. The distribution system is big, and we want to use this extensive process to be able to accurately prioritize the expensive investments that we need to make meaningful reliability progress. A way that we're working to maintain affordability while still making improvements in reliability is by using some of the federal funding that has been made available through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the IIJA, and the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA. These are both large federal funding programs that have similar goals of improving electric system reliability in an affordable manner. We first issued an order to the utilities to report on their applications to these funding programs on May 12th of last year. And then in a more recent order on February 23rd, we expanded the request to include pursuits of funding opportunities in the IRA as well as the IIJA. This order also expanded the scope to transmission owners to voluntarily submit reports as well. 2 examples of programs are listed here. The Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnerships, which includes formula grants, utility industry grants, smart grid grants, and innovative partnership grants. And the purpose of this GRIP funding is exactly the goal that we're trying to achieve in our state, reducing the likelihood and consequences of disruptive events through designing a more resilient grid. And in addition to the GRIP funding, the MPSC is coordinating and identifying numerous additional opportunities to compete for federal funding for resiliency improvements, including energizing improvements in rural areas, transmission facilitation projects, home energy efficiency rebates, and the second example that I have listed here, financing opportunities through the Loan Program Office's Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment Programs, or the Section 1706 program. This Section 1706 program is a first of its kind, providing very low-cost debt to utilities building new infrastructure through this federal program to fund needed utility improvements at a lower cost to ratepayers. The utilities just need to apply for it. And we have even more to come. We're currently working to develop a technical conference on resilience pathways, which is expected to be announced in the coming weeks. This is just a sneak preview here. And finally, while the causes of poor reliability are technical in nature, the impacts of poor reliability are anything but technical. We know that Michiganders who are forced to go without power are sometimes placed in untenable positions. We received a letter just a couple days ago sharing with us the struggles one local community faced when many residents lost power for several days over the course of the most recent storms. When the power, and I'm sure you all have received countless as well. When the power goes out, people lose. They lose the ability to work from home. They lose the ability to stay warm in the winter or cool in the summer. They lose food, they lose medicine, and in some instances, they've lost pets. Or in others, their health has been impacted. None of this is okay, and we're working diligently and in a systematic way to make sure that we identify the root cause of the problems and the right solutions. Just like the problems with the system didn't happen overnight, we know they will not be fixed overnight. However, it's our hope that with the additional information that we're seeking through the audit and through improved reporting and transparency, that we'll get the information that we need to identify and require the implementation of solutions. As we do this, we want to hear from customers. So we're hosting 3 town halls next week. Your offices all received information about these town halls late last week, and we would certainly welcome you sharing these opportunities with your constituents. So again, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to join you today. Before I take questions, though, I'd like to flag the Commission's social media pages, in particular our Facebook and Twitter pages. We're incredibly active during energy emergencies and during outages in sending out information and sharing where to help find important safety messages. And I want to take a moment to thank all of you who have used your own social media accounts to share those messages as well. We're grateful for your partnership in sharing that vital information with Michiganders. Madam Chair, I'm happy to take any questions that you or the committee may have.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So I appreciate the new information that you're asking regarding auditing. Why were you not doing that before, or were you doing it before? And why not in such great detail?
Yeah, this is the first time that an audit like this has been requested, a third-party independent audit. Previous commissions have certainly asked for information from the utilities before, but this is a new way of getting information and getting, hopefully, to the bottom of the answers that we need.
And so will you have the old information also posted on the website of what you didn't get? Will you have the old information that you were gathering in addition to the new information?
Yes, absolutely. All of our information that we do is posted publicly. It's all a part of the dockets. Everything that we do is public.
Okay. And also a quick question. So if the Michigan Public Service Commission, I hear they're planning to give a complete rate increase of $622 million to DTE customers. Is there going to be a refund if the reliability does not improve and power outages are not prevented?
So the the rate increase that you're referring to is an open case that's in front of the commission. There has not been any decision that's made on that yet, and I'm not actually allowed to talk about that case because it's an open case in front of the commission right now. But in terms of refunds and penalties, that's a part of the rulemaking process that I referred to.
Right.
So, that was a 3+ year process where we worked very closely with stakeholders, including community groups, customers themselves, to set that new $35 per day automatic credit in the rules. I realize that that's not enough to fully compensate customers.
Correct.
But we do think it's a meaningful step in the right direction compared to the existing rules, which is just the $25 that you have to request. And that's $25 total, not $25 per day. I also just wanted to mention one other thing that we're doing in regards to potential penalties. We'll be initiating an incentives and disincentives work group in the near future to further investigate and continue to work closely with stakeholders, again, including these community and customer groups, to see if there are any additional penalties or payments are the right course of action for the utilities.
Okay. Any questions? Representative McFall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you guys for being here. I appreciate your testimony. Can you tell me what authorities and tools does the MPSC need to truly hold utilities accountable, ensure affordable, reliable energy for customers, and make impacted customers whole?
Mm-hmm. We have a lot of tools available to us, and we feel like we are deploying everything that's available right now. Like I mentioned, I don't think that we're going to be able to solve this overnight. It's going to take some time for these actions that we're taking to begin to start having those measurable and noticed effects on the reliability of the infrastructure. But the audit that we released the RFP on Monday that will be kicking off shortly. The additional transparency that we're posting to the Commission's website, and then additionally these work groups that we'll be having on incentives and disincentives will hopefully be able to identify further actions that we'll be able to take to make those much needed improvements.
If I might ask one more question, how did you come up with the locations for the town halls? And can you tell me when will one in Detroit occur?
Sure. So we tried to choose locations that were pretty hard hit by the ice storms and by the outages. So that's why Jackson and Dearborn were chosen. That was in that band of the heavy icing and the heavy outages. We also know that Detroit was also very hard hit. The reason that we ended up choosing Dearborn over Detroit for the DTE service territory was that we had 2 hearings in downtown Detroit last year, and we're having another close to downtown Detroit on the DTE rate case in the coming weeks. So we're trying to diversify the locations of where we're doing all of these public comments a little bit.
I appreciate that. To really diversify, though, which would allow people that can't travel to downtown, would be to place it someplace else. Because we have a lot of senior citizens that they're not able to make it downtown because, as we know, our public transportation isn't that great. Whole other subject. But I would appreciate something in other sections of Detroit.
Okay, that's great to hear.
Thank you.
I do just want to note one of them is virtual too. So for anybody who has trouble with transportation.
Senior citizens again.
Okay, good. That's good feedback. Thank you.
Okay, Chair recognizes Representative Burns.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation this morning. I appreciate it. So one of my biggest concerns is that, while customers throughout our state are dealing with losing power and everything else that comes with that, oftentimes the shareholders and executives of these companies appear to be doing quite well. They continue to realize profit, executives receive bonuses, and so on, while customers are, losing groceries, medicine, and I could go on. Does the Commission currently have the power Or would it need to be granted the power from the legislature to deny executive bonuses while customers are suffering? What does that look like?
So thanks for the question. Right, as I tried to pretty explicitly illustrate at the beginning of the presentation, we can't make those management decisions for the company. So we set the rates that the utilities are able to collect from ratepayers, and then those rates, the money then is in the utilities' hands, and they have the ability to spend that money where they want.
Is that something that the legislature could change? As that's my question. I understand that that's how you're currently operating. Is that because of something that was already put in place by the legislature that could be transitioned, perhaps? And thank you for the response. I appreciate it.
So, I mean, I think the legislature has pretty broad discretion when it comes to setting policy for the state, and the commission, as a creature of statute, would work to implement that. I think from a rate setting standpoint, we are not including sort of executive bonuses for financial kind of performance as part of how we determine what the rates are. But to the commissioner's point, there is an ability for utilities to sort of utilize the dollars that are marked for shareholders for purposes of their choice.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Chair recognizes Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. And I'm very excited to hear about the utility audit. That sounds like exactly what we need to get a very objective view of what's really happening. I just wanted to ask how the legislature can help change things, maybe help our consumers take matters into their own hands, bringing community solar to the fore and rooftop solar, how we can maybe lift some of the caps we have. Is that really in your hands? Are those things we can change? I did hear from people who had rooftop solar that they were able to continue using their stored energy to keep their refrigerators going, much like people spending thousands of dollars on generators for their homes. So how can we let the people compete a little bit against the utilities by creating their own energy?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I want to highlight the technical conference that we'll be hosting as a result of these outages. That technical conference will explore some of those options, and will hopefully try to get all of these options on the table, both utility or customer options. And start talking through those. As far as the rooftop solar cap, that's a legislative decision. Anything else?
Any more questions? Representative Andrews.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In both of the previous testimonies, the issue of performance-based rates came up. You're probably aware, but the MPSC conducted a study back in 2016 that I think was published in 2018 on the possibility of implementing performance-based rates. The study found that the MPC had pretty broad authority to institute a model like that, but it doesn't appear that beyond the publication of the study, illuminating that was a possibility and that there was a power to do so, that anything happened in the intervening 5 years. Do you have any idea or any thoughts on why no progress was really made in that regard? Given that it seems like there is some consensus among even the utilities that this would be a good model to move to, do you foresee beginning to move in that direction? And are there any legislative hurdles that stand in the way of implementing that sort of a system?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent question. Thank you. So the performance-based rate making and incentives and disincentives are kind of two terms for the same thing. Sorry, I think we've been kind of mixing them up. So the incentives and disincentives work group that I referenced is PBR. It is performance-based rate making. Those are kind of just two ways of saying the same thing. We have a lot of terminology in this industry. So the work group that we'll be kicking off is on performance-based rate making. And we're going to look at that report from 2016 that you referenced, as well as any progress that's been made since then, including a few performance-based rate making proposals that have that the Commission ordered the utilities to submit recently. When did
It was part of their distribution plan. So in the 2021 filings, I think they included performance-based regulation. Their initial kind of crack at it, and I think there's been some back and forth in terms of, stakeholder feedback on those proposals, and then alternatives to be able to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've asked for these proposals from the utilities. We're working through them with stakeholders, and then we're going to continue working through them as a part of this incentives and disincentives work group.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any more questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much for your presentation today. We look forward to working with you. We feel the legislature has power, and we intend to use it on behalf of our customers and our constituents. Yeah, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Now we're going to take time to hear testimony from our constituent base. I'd like to call to the table the Mayor of Highland Park, Glenda McDonald. Also, James Diamore, Eloise Garley, and M. Perry. If you could all take a seat at the table, I'd appreciate it. And we appreciate your patience. Honestly, we do. Okay, if you could make sure when you're speaking that you turn the red button on. Okay, we're going to start with the Mayor of Highland Park and my former constituent, Glenda McDonald.
Good morning to this esteemed body. Thank you for having me. I'm here on behalf of the City of Highland Park and my constituents, as well as myself. Highland Park, for those who don't know, is an enclave city surrounded by Detroit. It's 100 years old, and it seems like our infrastructure for DTE is 100 years old. Certain sections of our city experience outages at least twice a year. This is the continuous. Doesn't have to be a storm. Sometimes it's just the wind. Sometimes it's just we don't know what happened. But this past storms, we experienced outages 4 times. 4 times between February and March. 2 in one area and 2 in another area. The area that is continuously going out, which we call our southeast quadrant, has had 5 outages in the past year. 2 years, 2 years. Every summer, every winter, and sometimes in the spring. We continuously go down. We know that it is our circuits, our grid that we're on. We know that the infrastructure is outdated. And in this last outage, my fire department went down, my police department went down, City Hall went down, and 2 senior buildings. And these seniors do not have access to generators. And when I was listening to DTE say they offer generators to communities that is consistently out and have a population of senior citizens, no one reached out to me, as well as I was in continuous contact with our rep from DTE for the county and state. And not once did they mention that we have generators to help these seniors. I want to thank State Rep Mike McFall, who is our state rep now. And yes, in the continuous times that you were our state rep, you were there. But no, this problem is ongoing. It's not something that happens. It just happens continuously, and it has to stop. we have a very high population of seniors. I have 6 senior buildings in a 2.9 square mile. 6. And that means there's one in every single quadrant of our city. And these seniors are experiencing high volumes of outages. And like I said, our fire department went down, the generator didn't kick in, so that is dangerous to the city. We could not get, they had to lift up the doors if they had a fire. The police department, technology went down. We had to go to antiquated in order to make sure that we get our calls. City Hall, I had to shut down twice. All technology went down. And that's because we cannot continue these outages. I cannot run a city, however small it is, without power. We just can't do that. And again, although I did talk to these reps, no one mentioned generators. Our medium income in our city is, it says 25,000, but we have a high poverty rate, People cannot afford to buy generators just to continuously heat and provide lights to their homes. We know that it's becoming a necessity. People called me crying that they have seniors. I have a 91-year-old aunt who lives in that quadrant, and she refuses to leave her home because she's paid for it, and she paid DTE her bill. And without the heat, she's 91, has arthritis through her body. It is sad that she cannot get services back. $35 is a disgrace. It's a disgrace. And something has to be done to that. And to the MPSC, I hope that you look into all of these things, not just the big cities, but the little small 2.9 and 2.3 mile cities like Highland Park and Hamtramck that sits around a big city. We lose power. We lose our food. We lose everything. They lose their medicines. And as the mayor of the city, I will no longer stand for this. And if I have to fight, I'll fight. So I'm hoping that this body take in consideration that there are little small cities and little small towns in Michigan that deserve the same treatment as the big cities. And I hope that you all do something about it. Thank you, and I appreciate your time.
And yes, and I appreciate your comments. And as your former rep, I definitely fought a lot for Highland Park, for sure. And I do also recognize when the power is out in those senior buildings, and there are quite a few of them, the elevators don't work either. And so those seniors are really stuck on their floor or in their apartments with no electricity, no way to get down. And you're right, it's tragic and it's heartbreaking. And something really needs to change with it. You're absolutely right. You're correct. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Let's now hear from James Diamore.
Thank you, Chairwoman Scott, Vice Chairs Andrew and Wenzel, members of the committee, for really hearing us today, allowing us to share our stories. Okay, yes, there are good people who work for and contract with DTE. However, I come to you today feeling like I've spent the last several weeks in the Twilight Zone. This is thanks to the 2 recent and painful power outages. Plus, we have the added bonus of a flooded basement. It's been a long and grueling few weeks, and I've just about had it with DTE. Our home is in the southeast side of Ann Arbor. It's a red brick, gambrel roof, 100-year-old home in a lovely neighborhood. Thanks to DTE, we are out at least $20K due to sump pump failure after the second power outage last week. This didn't have to happen. In April 2018, we had a power outage that lasted for 2.5 days. Shortly before power was restored, I observed a transformer 7 houses north of us with sparks flying. The DTE team did their fix. Power was restored. A year later, in July of 2019, we had a series of power surges thanks to the same transformer. The surges built up in power and frequency over a week. We reported the surges multiple times. For the grand finale, the surges got so big, they fried all of our surge protectors. Our house reeked of electrical fire. It was rather scary, actually. DTE finally took care of it. By the way, the surges were due to faulty equipment, not bad weather. There have been a variety of periodic outages since then. The transformer on our block has been an issue for over 5 years, and DTE never totally fixed it. Okay, fast forward to last February 22nd, the night of the ice storm. Around 8:30 p.m., my wife and I could hear popping sounds. Our power flickered, and then that was that. Our favorite transformer once again was not working and took out our block. Now, we live on a corner. Out of the 4 homes on the corner, only our home and our block was out. My neighbors across the street shared what they saw, our not-so-friendly transformer spark with flames and wires burning. Wednesday was the beginning of several days of frigid hell or purgatory. Wednesday turned into Thursday into Friday. By Friday, our house temp was 41 degrees. My wife and I couldn't get warm. We have 2 small dogs that shiver nonstop. We needed help and had trouble finding it thanks to our very sweet girls who are not fond of other dogs. All of our bodies were struggling with the freezing house temperatures. Finally, a college buddy of mine invited us to stay with him. My wife stayed behind to keep tabs on the sump pump and watch for frozen pipes due to this potential enhanced danger of this outage. Thankfully, the power was restored on Friday afternoon. You know, listen to other stories, we were lucky. It had only been several days without power. It still took almost 24 hours for the house to heat back up. It took a few days for the chills and coughs from our extreme cold to leave our bodies. Well, when we finally warmed back up, wet snow arrived on Friday, March 3rd. We were anxious not to do a repeat. It was too much for us. Sadly, power outage number 2 hit our house the next morning. This was Saturday, March 4th at 10 a.m. It failed a second time. It was traumatic to face getting cold so again. The chills arrived more quickly this time. Thankfully, our 1.5-year-old sump pump backup was running smoothly. Until it wasn't. Around 10 p.m., we noticed a strange silence. I went downstairs and discovered our entire basement covered with water. The backup sump pump had died. It was total panic time. Eventually, the water would rise to 4 inches. I waded in the dark water to save what I could. Didn't matter. Damage was done. $20,000 worth of damage. Remediation to dry the basement out, plus replacing the clothes washer and food and freezer, is $5,000. Repairing damage to the basement floor, the supports and stairs is estimated at $15,000 or more. Add those 2 together and it's at least $20K. We were lucky. The same transformer that had been breaking down since 2018 took out once again only our block and the one next to it. Our neighbors had power and a fairly empty fridge, so unlike many, we could save some of our food and charge our phones. And yes, our neighbors don't have friendly dogs either, so I guess we couldn't help out there. The cost continued to grow beyond $20K. The additional days in extreme cold chilled us to the bone and took time to heal. We could not get the remediation team out until the power came on and the basement emptied out. The stress is through the roof. We own a home-based small business. We're not able to work for almost 3 weeks straight thanks to power outages, chilled body recovering challenges, and the need to beat the mold for moving in. We don't feel like we can trust DTE to fix that transformer properly. We can't afford another power outage like this with our business. We have to protect ourselves, since DTE isn't. We are looking at a whole house generator, which may cost an additional $10,000 or more. So when you include that, the cost thanks to this is over $300,000. Okay, we have power now, and most importantly, the warmth in our cozy home. What's next? My wife and I are still living on edge and stress, and we have months of repairs and long hours of work to catch up due to business closure. Enough is enough. DTE needs to do better. My wife and I have suffered regularly for more than 5 years due to a faulty transformer DTE continues to not fix permanently. We shouldn't have to pay tens of thousands of dollars due to their shoddy repair work. Come on, DTE. You can do better in Michigan. I want to thank everyone for listening this morning.
Thank you very much for that testimony. We appreciate it. And we're so sorry for the losses that you've experienced, truly. Let's now hear from Eloise Garley.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. My name is Eloise Garley. I am a resident of Detroit. I'm a mother of 3. I'm a member of Michigan United. I am a community organizer. I am a proud member of my community that is between Joy Road and Southfield. But unfortunately, I'm a customer of DTE Energy. I am here today because I am one of the hundreds of thousands of Michiganders affected by DTE brutal and inhumane power outage. I am an immigrant American from Liberia. And trust me, when I came to the USA in 2000, I never thought I would face a developing country crisis, frequent power outages, especially as we wound down from COVID. Unfortunately, DTE Energy disregard for economically challenged communities had led me to conclude that DTE is another oppressor of poor Black, brown people based on a history of experience I have had with them. It's power outages, making payment arrangements, unfair price hacking, and disregard for people with health conditions. Power outage is not the first time my home has been out of power. I remember last year, August, I had to go back to my days in Liberia when I had a civil war in my country and we didn't have power, so we used the lantern. And I used it throughout my teen-ish years. And why we didn't have power, electricity in that country, whenever power went, it meant the death squads were outside taking lives. It meant the warring factions were fighting. It meant someone's home was being brutalized or someone was taken from their home, so they didn't want anybody to see that. So as a teenager, while using this as electricity, I got traumatized by darkness. Whenever it's dark, I think of the days of my dark teen-ish years in Liberia. And this is what my community looked like when there's no electricity in my community at night. And I'm a single mom. Trying to secure my home and my children, I get terrified. But I will go on to explain that, as I stated, when it comes to making payment arrangement with DTE Energy, I remember in 2021, while going through a divorce, I was behind in payments, and I had called to make payment arrangement. Fortunately, I went through and was told that I needed to come out with $300+ within a specific period of time. I paid $1,000+ within that period of time. Then I got a letter from DTE Energy that was going to be removed from the payment plan and needed to come out with the full amount. So I called again and referred them to my payment plan letter. Unfortunately, I was told that I needed to go apply for assistance. And I said, I'm sorry. My zip code does not determine my eligibility for assistance. I insist to be on the payment plan. And I got on that payment plan. So now, I've been out of power since February 22nd, 4 days in a row. Now, here's the kicker. My last bill was $10 less, and I had a full circle. I'm a single mom. I take care of my money. I look at my bill. I know what I spend. It was $10 less than the bill when I was without power for 4 days. Now, trying to make sure I cross all my T's and dot my I's, I went back to my DTE bills and found out that the circle I was billed for that was less was 32 days. So I went back to find another circle, and I saw that in December of 2022, my billing circle was 33 days, and I was $33 less than the one given to me in February when I didn't have power for 4 days. Mind you, All those other days, I have power. So why 4 days I don't have power and I bill more than what I had when I had power throughout the cycle? So the $35 that you giving to us, are you telling us you taking it for us without our consent? Lastly, here's the sad one. I got tested for COVID on the 22nd of February. So what did I mean? Michigan rule said I should stay home for 5 days. The second day, there was no electricity. So I felt we'd come back the next day. Thursday, it got brutally cold, and DTE sent us an email to tell us that we're facing extreme weather condition. In that extreme weather condition, I was facing chills, headache, and aches because of COVID. And I had no electricity. I couldn't go to the hotel because I had COVID. I couldn't go to a relative home because I had COVID. So I had to sleep in my home without electricity, made a makeshift bed in my kitchen, turned the gas stove on, and afraid to sleep through because I don't know what would happen. So I would close and say that this ain't right, that we have to be living a third world lifestyle in one of the greatest countries, which is the USA, simply because DTE Energy thinks poor people don't deserve equal services like their 1% customers. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for that riveting testimony. I appreciate it. Next, we will have, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. Oh, M. Perry. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm M, and I live in Southfield, Michigan, just 6 minutes from the Detroit border. And I'm the Environmental Justice Director at Michigan United, but I'm here today because I'm also a customer of DTE and Consumers Energy. I stepped in because other folks who lost power weren't able to make it out here on a Wednesday morning, so I came to share what happened to me. Like I said, I'm a customer of DTE, and in February, I lost power. My home lost power for 36 hours straight. And my house doesn't have a whole lot of insulation, and we couldn't get firewood anywhere. It was all sold out, so it was really, really cold. And my dogs, my whole family, we were bundled up under. It's a good thing I collect blankets because we needed at least 11 quilts at a time just to stay warm. And on top of that, my partner and I both work from home, and our teenager does school online. And you can't do that without electricity. You can't do it without internet, and you certainly can't do it while you're shivering under those 11 quilts for warmth. So I couldn't go to my mom's house because I was already full of other people in my family that were without power. And so luckily we had friends where we could take shelter. We had a place where we could go to get warm for a few hours and charge our devices and work so we didn't miss out on wages. But a lot of other people didn't have that. We were the lucky ones. We were lucky even though we lost hundreds of dollars on groceries. I lost medication that I need for my health that I still haven't been able to get yet. We lost a lot. We were inconvenienced and we were really cold, but it was only 36 hours. It was only 2 nights. And we had places where we could go to charge our devices. So we were the lucky ones. But there were hundreds of thousands, almost 750,000 homes that didn't have power. A lot of people that aren't here today and aren't able to share their stories. So I just hope that in addition to what Eloise and the other folks say today, and what I say, you can consider the other people that aren't here today to share what they went through. The people like me that didn't get any rebate because we didn't qualify, or the people that were without power for 96 hours. I knew my cousins that were staying at my mom's house. They didn't have power for that long. And they had a small child. That was a huge inconvenience. There was someone, Monique Whitaker, who was going to come here today but couldn't. She was without power for 4 days straight. She lost 30 ounces of breast milk. She lost over $1,000 in spoiled groceries and hotel fees. And on top of all of that, her son got sick throughout the process. We also know someone that was without power for 2 weeks straight, 14 days. So this is real. This is happening to real people. So please consider those people. Again, I'm here because I'm a customer of DTE, and that's because it's the only option. And it shouldn't be the only option. History is showing us it is definitely not the best option. And I can't understand why the biggest utility corporations can't compensate their customers who pay the bills for the money that we've lost due to their poor service. And that's because they are, regardless of what they say, they are holding those shareholders accountable. They are holding to them over us. They are choosing profits over people time and time again, both DTE and consumers. And I get it, winter's intense, but it's Michigan. We deal with winter, ice, wind, snow every single year. We need to do better. We deserve to do better because we are paying the bills and we deserve to give reliable service. This needs to end now. I think we deserve to have hourly and automatic compensation for outages, this past outage and all future outages. And until we can actually expect reliable service, the rate hikes need to end as well. No more rate hikes. I'm hoping that the legislator can value the people that they represent. So all of you can value us, all of us that are here today, over your donors. And I hope that you can also give the Michigan Public Service Commission, who's here today, some clear mandates and tools that they need to make this right. I'm hoping that by allowing me and the others here to speak today, that this means that change is going to happen, because change is really needed right now, immediately. And yeah, Michigan residents deserve better. Utilities are a human right. So hopefully our representatives can represent us and not the monopolies, these utility corporations that continue to put Michiganders in harm's way. Thank you.
We appreciate your testimony, honestly. We appreciate you being here, being the real face of the emails and calls that we get. Mr. Lar, would you like to maybe comment on anything, as DTE has been mentioned repeatedly by the customers here?
Sure, Chair, I'd be happy to direct the investments that we make. And again, I've apologized to the customers multiple times, and I'll continue to say that we're working on investment in the grid. But the way this gets better for all of this is investing in the grid. I understand the frustration, but we need to continue to invest to make it better. Things do not get better if you don't change out transformers. We worked extensively in Highland Park with the previous mayor on trying to improve different areas in Highland Park. So I'd welcome the opportunity to reach out and work directly with you, Mayor, on the needed improvements. We work for all of our communities to try to improve power. There's no amount of engineering that'll take out an ice storm. We need to continue to improve our performance. We own that. That's on DTE. Thank you.
Thank you. And we, as a legislature, will make sure that we work and continue to work on the benefit of our customers and our constituents, and also with stakeholders to make changes, because change needs to come. I will recognize now Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all so much for sharing your stories. As the chair said, it is extremely useful to see you in person, hear you tell your stories in detail, and that this is just such a tiny fraction of the pain that so many people in the state of Michigan suffered. I really just wanted to make a comment to kind of put together the things that you're all saying. I think at one of the presentations, one of the utilities, I believe DTE, that they mentioned that at some percentage, maybe it was like 50% of customers in 1 year never have an outage. But that's kind of hiding the truth that the other 50% has outage after outage after outage. My sister lives in Redford Township. For years, I knew every time it sprinkled, their power would be out for days on end. And they couldn't afford it, but they finally got a generator because they just absolutely had to. It was the only way they could survive. So I just want to really highlight that idea. It may not be everybody, but the people it affects are over and over and over, and we will do our best to make a difference. Thank you.
And I know we're way over time, but we do have two more representatives that want to make comments, and we're going to be wrapping this up. Representative McFaul.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mayor McDonald, for being here, and thank you for all the work that you're doing on behalf of your citizens, fighting for them, especially the seniors. And I want to thank you for bringing up how small communities are treated. DTE treats small, low-income communities a lot different than it does more affluent communities. That's very clear. It's why Highland Park doesn't have streetlights. So one of the things you could do is bring back streetlights to Highland Park, which is, of course, another subject. But again, thank you all for being here. I appreciate all of you giving your stories. Thank you.
Representative Burns.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for your testimony. It was incredibly moving, and it does not fall on deaf ears. As I know we're looking to wrap up the meeting, I wanted to share, Representative Churches was not able to be here today. She did ask me to relay a story, something that she experienced in her district just last week. She was visiting a local elementary school, reading to a class, and when she was done reading, there was a question and answer period about her job and kind of what we do here in Lansing. And an elementary-aged child asked her what we can do to keep the power on. They asked, what can we do to keep, my neighbors, my friends, my household from losing power? And I think that's something that a lot of us can relate to. And I would just like to leave our representatives, especially from DTE and consumers, with that message and with that thought. Our most vulnerable communities are suffering. Our folks at the table right now have shared that with you in no uncertain terms. And our children, this, I believe, is a 9-year-old child. Our children are asking about this. They are concerned about it. They are experiencing anxiety around this issue. People are suffering. So please just take that child and their concern with you as you move forward and you look to do your jobs better. We are counting on you to do that, and we will hold you accountable in that process. Thank you.
Thank you. We also want to recognize we do have two people on Zoom that would like to make comments. Okay. Can we hear from Kathleen Russ? Can you hear us?
Hi.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Representative Scott and committee, for the opportunity to share my experience. I live in Royal Oak. I lost power on Wednesday, February 22nd, around 8:30 p.m. My power was restored on Tuesday, February 28th, around 11:30 in the morning. On Wednesday night, after I lost power, I tried to report the outage, but could not reach DTE because the app had crashed and the website and the phone system were unavailable as well. So I went to bed. When I woke up the next morning, it was 56 degrees in my house, and I was one of over 800,000 people who were without power. On Thursday afternoon, DTE sent me a text saying no estimate was available for restoration of my power, so I went to stay with some friends. On Friday, when there was still no estimate for restoration, I set my taps to drip because by that time it was 46 degrees in my house and I was concerned about freezing pipes. On Saturday morning, I received a notification that power would be restored by the end of that day. By 10:30 that night, I asked my friend if I could stay another night on her couch. On Sunday morning, I received notification that my power would be restored by the end of the day on Sunday. By 10:30 that night, I asked my friend if I could stay another night on her couch. On Monday morning, I received notification from DTE that they could not provide an estimation for the restoration of my power. After 5 days of constantly changing notifications, to be told that there was now no estimate for restoration made me wonder if DTE was intentionally gaslighting me or if I were part of some large social experiment. No one at DTE could give me any information as to the nature of the issue or why it was taking so long for my neighborhood's power to be restored. On Tuesday morning, I received notification that my power would be restored on Wednesday. I went home to check on my house, where it was now down to 40 degrees. While I was home, my power came back on. I was relieved to be able to turn off my taps, which had been dripping at that point for 5 days. The waste of water makes me really sad. I lost the entire contents of my refrigerator and freezer. DTE told me that they could not reimburse me for any food lost, but suggested that I call my insurance company to see about filing a claim. My insurance company told me that I could file a claim, but if I did, my insurance premium would probably increase next year. I think that's called a catch-22. I took the day off work on Wednesday so I could do laundry and go grocery shopping. 2 days later, on the night of Friday, March 3rd, I lost power again. When I got up the next morning, it was 56 degrees in my house. I set my taps to dripping again and went to stay with friends. Again, DTE's notification system seemed more invested in confusing and upsetting me than actually providing me with information. And to give you an example, my neighbor texted me on Sunday, March 5th around 7:30 at night to let me know that our neighborhood power had been restored. I finally received a notification from DTE letting me know that my power had been restored on Wednesday, March 8th. And for the record, I again lost all the contents of my refrigerator, food which I had just purchased on Wednesday. I want to be clear as to the nature of my issues with DTE. When 800,000 customers are out of power, I do not expect that I will be the first customer restored. What I do expect, however, is intelligent and timely communication. When DTE tells me that my power will be restored by the end of the day, what does that mean? 5 o'clock p.m., 10 p.m., midnight? At some point, a decision needs to be made about staying another night in a hotel or on a friend's couch, or preparing yourself to spend another night in a near freezing home without power. And to be frank, by day 6, to receive a message or to hear a commercial from DTE telling me that they understand how frustrating it is to be without power does not provoke a warm and fuzzy response in me. I made a complaint to the Michigan Public Service Commission, and I received an email from DTE on February 28th to say that my complaint had been assigned to a DTE consultant who would contact me within 2 business days. I have yet to hear from that consultant. Finally, the messaging around the $35 credit was confusing, and I had to call DTE to find out if the credit was going to be automatic or if I had to apply. I was told that the $35 credit for my first outage would be automatic, but I had to apply for a $25 credit, which I may or may not receive for my second outage. Speaking of that $35 credit, I am very fortunate that I had friends that I could stay with and that I can afford to replace food 2 times over within 2 weeks. I am truly outraged on behalf of the people who had no choice but to stay in a near freezing home and who had to replace their food 2 times over. To offer people in that situation $35 to offset their losses is at best insensitive and frankly unconscionable. I object that there is no accountability for DTE and that I have no alternative. If DTE were a store or a restaurant, I could take my business elsewhere. I do not have that option with DTE. It is very clear to me that their shareholders and not their customers are their first priority. In closing, I would like to remind you that in a 2-week period, I was without power for 10 of 14 days. Governor Whitmer wants Michigan to be the leader in electric vehicle technology. I was without power, without electricity for 10 of 14 days. I would not accept an EV right now if you gave me one. If I had an EV, I would have had to Uber to work and add that cost to the other expenses I incurred due to the loss of power. Governor Whitmer's goal and the current state of DTE are clearly at odds, and I believe that's yet another reason why things need to change with DTE. I thank you for listening to me and giving me the opportunity to share my experience, and I really, truly appreciate that you're having this hearing, and I look forward to seeing positive changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen, for your testimony. We really appreciate it. We'll move next to the next Zoom participant, Nick Schrock. Please proceed. Can you hear us?
Thank you. Yes. Can you hear me? Thank you, Madam Chair and the committee for the opportunity to speak. I'm Nick Schreck. I'm a Bloomfield Township resident and a DTE customer. I'm speaking today in my individual capacity and not on behalf of my employer or any of my clients. We lost power in the recent ice storm from Wednesday, February 22nd through Monday, February 27th, meaning that our power was out for 5 days. I'll note that we were also without power for 3 days last August after the strong wind event that came through the state. These lengthy power outages, they're stressful, they're emotionally and physically taxing, and they're expensive. Fortunately, here in my home, we actually have a fireplace, so I was able to burn some wood and keep our pipes from freezing. But it was very cold and very uncomfortable, and I burned through lots of firewood, which is an added expense that now we have to make up as a result of this lengthy outage. A few years back, I purchased a gas generator, a portable gas generator, because we had previous outages from DTE where we lost food in our freezer and refrigerator. So I purchased a gas generator. I'm able to run extension cords into the freezer, keep food from spoiling. However, that had to be filled multiple times, which again is an additional expense. I had to make several trips to a gas station. In fact, many of the gas stations in my local community were out of power themselves, so I had to travel further to fuel up my generator. And most people cannot afford even a portable standby gas generator, so I'm more fortunate than most. And many of my neighbors have actually spent thousands of dollars on whole house standby generators because our power outages are so frequent and lengthy as DTE customers here in the township. And again, whole house generators are completely unaffordable for the vast majority of customers here in our region. And they would be unnecessary if we had a reliable utility that was able to restore our power within a reasonable time. This outage was a massive loss of economic productivity. I'm a law professor, and I had to cancel many meetings. I had to, I couldn't work remotely because we did not have internet access. And I had to juggle going back and forth between work and home, trying to keep a generator running, trying to keep a fire going, again, so that our house didn't freeze and make sure that our pet was safe. And again, many people don't have that option, right? So I'm fortunate to even be able to have that opportunity, but my work suffered. My work suffered as a result, as it's done repeatedly over the last few years of these outages. There are even more direct economic impacts to businesses that had to be shuttered, grocery stores that had food spoilage. Again, many gas stations that also provide food and beverages in many of our communities had massive spoilage as a result of this lengthy power outage. And this unreliability of our electric grid is really holding us back as a region. And as Kathy just mentioned, how can we electrify our vehicle fleets if we do not have a reliable source of electricity? It's really, really impossible to do so. These lengthy outages are also life-threatening. My wife and I were able to cope under these difficult circumstances. However, my immediate next-door neighbors are both 85 years old. And the woman, my neighbor, she recently had a stroke and a fall, and she is completely reliant upon an electric wheelchair. I was not able to contact them because their cell phone batteries died. I knew that they did not have electricity or any heat in their home. We had to do a welfare check. We had to contact Bloomfield Township Police to come in, do a welfare check on my neighbors. That's not only very harmful to my neighbors, but it's also taking away resources from the rest of the community to have to do that welfare check from the police department. Fortunately, they were able to get a hotel, but that was, again, an additional expense for my neighbors who are on a fixed income and a very limited income. So rather than spending money on fancy television advertisements, radio advertisements, and internet advertisements, and really focusing on maximizing profits for shareholders, DTE needs to improve our grid reliability and improve our restoration times. Residents should have the ability to install rooftop solar. The legislature need to lift that cap to allow those of us that want to install residential rooftop solar to be able to do so and to be able to sell our power to DTE at a reasonable price. Communities also need the ability to enter into community solar agreements so that they can generate electricity and get it from a close and reliable source to their residents. This will enable some redundancy. We can perhaps have batteries in homes that we can charge up with solar power to help when we have these lengthy outages. And also, we can then have DTE reduce their reliance on fossil fuels, continuing to burn coal and natural gas, which not only greatly impacts the poorest among us and environmental justice communities from harmful air pollutants, but it also continues to contribute to climate change. It's interesting sitting here listening to we've got these extreme weather events, and this horrible wicked weather that came through. And yes, it was a significant ice storm. But what's contributing to these wild weather events is the continued burning of fossil fuels. And DTE has repeatedly worked against transitioning to renewable energy. They have fought your predecessors in the legislature when there was attempts to increase renewable energy portfolio standards. They've repeatedly lobbied at both the state and federal level against comprehensive, aggressive action to address our warming climate. And so it's really, kind of rich to sit here and listen to them blame this on weather extreme and wild weather, which is a direct result of greenhouse gas emissions, which they've known about for decades and have fought against for decades. So I'm glad to hear that there's a new focus on that. We'll wait to see. It remains to be seen whether or not that's actually a change in corporate culture. We'll continue to have these extreme weather events. That's baked in for the foreseeable future. And so you as a legislature, I hope that you're able to enable us that are stuck here under these monopoly utilities to be able to generate our own power, to increase rooftop solar availability, consumer solar availability, so that we can transition to clean energy and that we can have more reliability here at home. Because we can't rely on our utility. Really hoping to be able to, those of us that can rely on ourselves, because that's really the choice that we're left with right now. Again, we need improved grid reliability and improved restoration times. It's really unsustainable for those of us in a region, prevents folks from aging in place, limits our economic potential here in the region as well. So thank you very much for your time. I really do appreciate the opportunity to address the committee.
Thank you so very much for your testimony and your comments. We truly appreciate it. Those were constituents from my district in Oakland County. So as you can see, a lot of people have been really inconvenienced. Yes.
This has come up so much, and I would like to address this because the MPSC did not. It's just, if you can indulge me.
Can you fill out a card?
I did.
Oh, you did? Oh, we're sorry. I apologize. Can you come forward, please? Are you Miss Edith Lee Payne? Yes. Thank you. Thank you all for your testimonies. I appreciate it. Is there anything? Okay. We're sorry. Thank you for coming forward. Could you please push the red button in front of you to speak on the microphone?
Again, good morning or good afternoon. My name is Edith Lee Payne. I'm a resident of Detroit and a DTE customer. Have been for some 40 years, I would say. First thing I want to offer to you is that these outages that we just experienced over the past few weeks is not new. In 1991, and these are from DTE's numbers, in 1991, there were 684,000 people without power. In 1995, there were 550,500 people without power. 1997, 454. I could go on. 1976, 373,000 people without power. So clearly something isn't being done. What I've learned from DTE through a house fire that I had, and someone mentioned about the alleys or easements in Detroit. Well, when they're vacated, a judge gives specific orders and gives all the utilities the orders that they are required to maintain those alleys and easements. So they shouldn't be overgrown, because DTE explains that they have line clearance cycles that are supposed to be 3 to 5 years, but those numbers continue to change. What they're required to do is keep their primary lines cleared a minimum of 10 feet. Their secondaries, the second row of lines, cleared a minimum of 4 feet. And it's supposed to last from one cycle to the next. They have informed me that they hire certified arborists that know the species of the trees and the growing patterns and how to directionally prune. Having said all of that, there should never be contact between wires and vegetation at all. Yet there is, and if we've learned anything from the August 14, 2003 blackout, we know what not trimming trees can do. DTE, can't read my glasses. DTE says that they have 4,400 miles of power line, over 1 million utility poles, and 4,000 circuits across 7,600 square mile system, serving 2.3 million customers. Well, with all the outages that we've had and wires that have been replaced and all the work that they've been doing, one would think that these wires have been replaced, poles have been replaced, but they have not. I wanted to bring to your attention, because as far as I know, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, Public Act 3 of 1939 is still in effect, is it not? Okay, I'm assuming that it is. It was this morning anyway, before I left. So having said that, for all of you that have posed the question, and this may look familiar to our Michigan Public Service Commissioners because I gave it to them, reminding them of their duties and what they have that they can enforce. In Section 460.10c, it is determination, and this is for public electric utilities. This is determination of noncompliance, order of remedies and penalties, and then it goes on contested case, violation, so on and so forth. But 10C1 says, except for a violation under this section and is otherwise provided under this section upon a complaint or on the Commission's own motion, if the Commission finds after notice and hearing that an electric utility or an alternative electric supplier has not complied with the provision or order issued under sections 10 through 10EE, or that a natural gas utility has not complied with a provision or ordered issued under section 10EE, the Commission shall order remedies and penalties necessary to make whole a customer or other person that has suffered damages as a result of the violation, including but not limited to one or more of the following. A, order the electric utility, natural gas utility, or alternative electric supplier to pay a fine for the first offense of not less than $1,000 or more than $20,000. For the second offense, the Commission shall order the person to pay a fine of not less than $2,000 or more than $40,000. For a third and subsequent offense, the Commission shall order the person to pay a fine of not less than $5,000 or more than $50,000. B, order a refund to the customer of any excess charges. C, this is the most applicable, order any other remedies that would make whole a person harmed, including, but not limited to, payment of reasonable attorney fees. The $35 credit, the $25 credit that gets passed around all the time, that's when your power goes out for a few minutes or maybe a day, and that's a compensation. This applies when your house catches fire after you tell DTE for a year to remove a dead tree out of the easement that they're required to maintain, and they don't do it. And then you move back in your house after staying in a hotel for 11 and a half months, and another dead tree also in the easement falls in your yard. And then a few months later, another dead tree that's left falls in your next door neighbor's yard. So I've had 2 house fires because of DTE Energy. I've lost 3 houses because of DTE Energy. My family has lost because they refused to reimburse me for my losses. They just simply said they disagreed, and I've went to Anthony Early's house. I've been everywhere. I've been to the Michigan Public Service Commission to get, can you just enforce the laws that are already there? So in answer to anybody that thinks that the $35 or $25 credit is not enough, it's not. And there's already something that this Michigan legislature has already provided that you should be telling your constituents.
Thank you so very much for your testimony, and I'm really sorry for the loss of your homes, and thank you for bringing that information to our attention.
And I just want to add one other thing, if DTE is still here. Because I work with utility vegetation management experts from around the country, I've learned a lot about, what they're required to do. I have offered my personal service to work with their line clearance department to help them organize because I'm a business person and know how to do that. My offer still stands, but it needs to happen. And I'm also here on behalf of Atalia Harris and others who died in house fires. See, people don't realize that the dangers in having your power out. Your house can still catch fire. These electrical surges, I just had a fire because of DTE May 16th. Staying in a hotel in August, power went out in Southfield. I'm stranded on the 3rd floor. Go stay with my son in Oak Park, his power is out. So it's widespread. I have hundreds of pictures from Plymouth, Westland, Southfield, Royal Oak, Birmingham, Detroit, all sides of their service territory that including around their substations. I just visited 3 of their 676. They need to do what they're required to do, and we need it for our safety and before any more money gets paid, because their net profit was $20.82 billion as of October 25th. Today it was 21 point something. So they've made over $1 billion just in a couple of months. They can afford it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I invite you to speak to Mr. Laura right behind you. We do have to get out of this room in about 5 minutes, but I do want to make a couple of points. As you can see, the consensus has been people over profits for sure, and I hope that you at Consumers and DTE are listening to that. And you may want to think about also, in the 70s, Lee Iacocca, who was the president of Chrysler, decided not to take any profits himself or his salary or bonuses, and he put it back into the company. That might be something that you all may want to consider. We in the legislature want to help do what we do to make your jobs easier and the lives of our constituents easier, to make sure the grid gets what they need, because the grid needs to be improved. But there's some things that you can do as well. And we are open to working with you, and we're open to working with MSPC as well. And we are going to be planning a work group around this because some changes need to be made and rewrites need to happen. Thank you very much for your participation today. I would like to also take a time right now to excuse Representative Jamie Churches. Can I have a motion? Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Yeah, so new this morning, and sports fans have heard this was coming, and now Diamond Sports Group, which runs Bally Sports, files for bankruptcy. Bally Sports Detroit, of course, broadcasts the Tigers, Pistons, and Red Wings games. Diamond has TV rights for 14